How's this gonna get hot?
Yeah, it is. It is gonna get hot.
Fire and blood hot. Woo!
Pump it up. Dun, dun, dun.
Welcome, everyone, to Maester Monthly, your favorite pseudo-monthly podcast hosted by the moderators of the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit. Just a warning, this podcast is spoilers extended. That means we can and will talk about spoilers from Winds of Winter sample chapters and all of the episodes of Game of Thrones, the TV show. You have been warned. My name is Michael, also known as Bookshelf Stud.
And my name is Eliana, also known as Glass Table Girl.
And my name is Matt, also known as Joe Magician.
And my name is Aaron, also known as AdmiralKird.
As always, we've got a great episode here for you with the hottest catches and the nicest takes from the subreddit in the last month. We are also going to talk a little bit about some old theories. That's today's big topic, is old theories, particularly ones that were just wrong, ugly and wrong. We're also going to discuss a little bit the exciting marathon comment spree that George R. R. Martin went on, presumably for days at a time at his computer. But we'll get to all that later. First, what we wanted to talk about, last time we had asked for those of you who are so inclined to leave some iTunes reviews, and we wanted to read some of these reviews because these are just so sweet and wonderful and nice, and it's nice to know people are listening to the podcast. My favorite was someone who picked up on the fact that everything we do is award-winning. One of 1,000 who said, just listened to your award-winning episode. It was great as always. I'm glad they traveled from the future where we won, presumably a Hugo, I would assume, guys?
Yeah, we won a Hugo.
Yeah. Hey, you heard it here first.
Or at the very least, we got invited to the Hugo Losers Party, which is really the big goal.
That's what you really want.
That's the end
game. We were
game.
Confirmed appropriate as a nominee by
That's
George
right.
R. R. Martin.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Among a bunch of other casts, but he did say that we were Hugo appropriate.
That's right. Yeah, we fit the category.
And another comment comes from Saratoga Jean, who says that, and all of you just get your imagination caps on. Imagine your funniest friends also knew a lot about A Song of Ice and Fire. Boom, you just got a little taste of Maester Monthly.
Boom.
I like
think that's
that they
accurate.
assume that we all have funny friends, so.
Yeah, we're friends. That's weird. What do you think Maester Monthly tastes like?
Fire and blood.
Does it taste like rum and apple cider?
Yeah, that's
True.
right. It tastes like Fireball, I think, is the
Oh
lesson.
god, that's the worst. That's actually the worst thing we could taste like.
Can't drink Fireball
Fireball
anymore.
and apple cider.
I don't think I've had fireballs since that incident.
That incident.
We won't break the wheel, Eliana. It's coming back around.
Yeah, just wait until Fire and Blood comes out, then we'll have to think of a new cocktail.
And then we got another comment from Dave B84. He said, good blend of in-depth analysis and comedy sprinkled in. The more guests, the better. The podcast, IMO, exclamation point.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to be disappointed by this episode, Dave. This is a nice, quiet one. No, but maybe just for Dave, we'll do a Dave B84 special where we get all 33 moderators on all at once.
Wait, could we get auto moderator too?
And a bot of ice and fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Tourney Herald bot.
Stephanie SH928 says that she could listen to us all day. And there's another review. We got what did we get? 11 reviews overall recently.
Yes.
From Carmack80 said, they make me laugh and provide insightful discussions. If you are in a Song of Ice and Fire pan,
If you're a pan,
We're selling these.
if you're in a Song of Ice and Fire fan, this is a must-have on your playlist. Great theory discussions, some provocative, some tinfoil, but all entertaining.
Some provocative. That's going on the poster. Right next to appropriate from George R. R. Martin.
For George R. R. Martin. Could you actually listen to Maester Monthly all day? Do we have enough hours that you can do this? Like a 24-hour block?
I think so.
And Nick Dingy says, there's a reason why there are so many 5-star ratings. This podcast does a perfect job combining humor with in-depth conversations and all things ASOIAF related. So thanks for the review, guys. Keep those reviews coming.
Let us know what you think.
We love seeing them.
Yeah, any feedback is good feedback. I wanted to give a special shout out also to a YouTube comment that won a special place in my heart. Richard Seymour, shout out to you on YouTube for pointing out that Gandalf the Grey became Gandalf the White, like WIGHT.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
It's incredible.
Now, in addition to the online interactions we've had with some of you, some of us were actually lucky enough to interact with you in person recently, and will interact with you in person soon. So, Eliana, do you want to plug your end of that?
Yeah, I had a great time at Ice and Fire Con, and, we had our Reddit meetup there, as well as doing a panel to talk about the fandom, and just getting to meet people from the community in general, and that was a great time. I got to meet I'm going to give some shout-outs. Got to meet users like James Lively and Shattered Jack, and the people who were cosplaying as Tormund and Val, but I don't remember your usernames, as well as Mac and Commoner 80. Thanks for hanging out with me this weekend. Got to meet some other people from the podcast community, like Behind the Iron Throne, and the usual suspects that I've met a few times, like History of Westeros, poor Quentin, Lady Gwyn was also there. So it was a great time in general, and just we ended up basically just having a conversation like one that would happen on the subreddit at the meetup. Just like discussing like timing of the books and just like how we think that the story is going to progress and things like that. So that was really great. Shattered Jack has suggested that from now on, instead of saying direwolves or wolves, we use the term murder doggos. And I'm not opposed to this idea.
I have to rewrite some of my posts.
I think you're going to just have to like find and replace all of it. But yeah, so really looking forward to going back to Ice and Fire Con again next year and meeting more people. And some other people who showed up from the mod team were Hamfast42 and Sir Dunk the Lunk.
Woo!
So that was really fun. And of course, hanging out with Scad from Davos Fingers, who showed up to the meetup. So if you didn't get to go to Ice and Fire Con, our mods are going to be showing up to some other events sometime soon. Throwing it over to you two.
Yeah, Matt.
Oh, you're killing me. Yes, coming up soon, we're going to be, me and Bookshelf Stud himself will be in Dallas for Con of Thrones on May 25th to 27th. We're going to be doing a Reddit meetup thread, or Reddit meetup there as well.
An IRL thread, yeah.
An IRL thread, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. Some people from the subreddit you might recognize. History of Westeros will be there. Lucifer Mean Lightbringer. Crowfood's daughter. And Something Like a Lawyer will be there as well, among the many, many amazing celebrities.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it should be a good time. I'm really looking forward to it. I've never been to Dallas, the Windy City, so I'm very excited about getting down to
Windy City.
Getting down to the Big Apple. Getting down to the City of Angels.
Nearby is Houston, the sunken city.
Oh,
it's true.
Too soon.
Yeah, a little bit too soon.
A little bit.
A little.
Also, for Game of Thrones, you'll be able to see Michael and I. We'll be on a bunch of panels. That will be a lot of fun.
Yes. Including one, if you liked our podcast on the 5-year gap, you're going to love hearing those words come out of our mouths in person. Because we are doing a panel on the 5-year gap along with some other great people.
5-year gap one. That's with Ashea from History of Westeros, and I think Joanna Lannister.
Yeah, it's we've got some real luminaries and us. It's gonna be great.
We're gonna sound very handsome on stage, so get ready for that.
Yeah.
Since we did an episode on the Pink Letter, you guys could always attend the Pink Letter.
I will probably be busy running from panel to panel. I'm doing 6 over the weekend.
6 panels. Yeah. It'll be great.
Crazy.
I would be like crying or like vomiting out of social anxiety if I were you.
Yeah.
You can see me like fidget with a pen during the Ice and Fire God panel. I'm just like, I can't do this.
I can't do this. I'm also going to be on what is it? The Direwolves one with 2 people from
Did
the
you mean
Ringer.
Murder Doggos?
The Murder Doggos one with Jason Concepcion and Mallory Rubin from the Ringer, and that is triggering anxiety, so that's going to be great.
Oh, but listen,
gonna
guys,
be
if you want to
awesome.
come to the chillest panel ever, Aziz from History of Westeros and I, we are doing a 2-man panel on Conan the Barbarian and George R.R. Martin.
What?
And that is going to be so fun. I've got the Google Doc up already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you suggest that one?
It's called Sword and Sorcery, the worlds of Robert E. Howard and George R.R. Martin.
What do you have to miss to go to that?
What do you have to miss to go? That's a great question. I should find that out.
Well, what are you sacrificing?
Yeah. That's the real question here. Pulling up the schedule. There are 39 panels or 39 things happening on Saturday. This is one of them. Instead of going to see Joe Dempsey, who plays Gendry, instead of going to see him,
Man.
you could come see Aziz and I talk about Conan the Barbarian for an hour.
That would actually be a hard choice. Like, I know if I were going, like, I know I'd have to support you, but also, like, Joe Dempsey.
Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to make it through the weekend because, like, every hour there's so much cool stuff happening. Like, it's going to be fantastic.
There's crazy stuff happening. There's also going to be a live King's Moot
Ugh.
where that's going to be re-legislated in person with fans able to make their arguments better than the characters themselves. Someone will speak for Victorian, and they won't be dumb. It will be great.
So usually at the beginning of the cast, we do a little discussion question to sort of get our juices flowing. But as with last time, we actually have Song of Ice and Fire current events to discuss. George R.R. Martin's blog post on his new blog, georgerrmartin.com/notablog, about Fire and Blood, which is titled Fire and Blood on the Way, which is, now I think that actually not a very exciting blog post title. And there's a bit of news about Fire and Blood in there, what it's going to contain, what it won't contain. But the real story is in the comments, where George R.R. Martin sat for days, I think, just replying to people's comments and answering questions with a candor heretofore unseen since the show began, I would say. Maybe that's not accurate. I don't know. It's been a while.
He answers like this at cons. He doesn't normally do it online.
Yeah. That's true. I half wonder if this wasn't him like trying to hype up his new blog. Like, oh, if you come to the comments here, you'll get to talk to George.
No comments are closed.
Yeah, no comments are closed.
I wonder if he actually saw that.
Oh God, I hope so. We gotta.
Really? I hope not.
This is why I want to get to
It was beautiful.
Worldcon, is so I can just have him sign an iPad.
Apologize.
Yeah.
Apologize in person.
Check out our Christmas intro if you haven't seen it. Yeah, check out the Christmas intro on YouTube. It's fully animated. Eliana did the drawings. Yeah. It's great.
It's
and
really
Aaron
great.
did the animation.
Poorly, very quickly, but
the whole thing's so good. So there were a lot of good things in George's comments on this blog post. What in particular stood out to you guys? I figure we'll just sort of, open it up a little bit, talk about what stood out to us from George's esoteric comments.
I thought the funniest thing that happened during this was during the initial blog post, it was teased that you would find out where the 3 eggs that Dany's hatched came from. And then George went into the comments and said, no, never mind, that's not in there. That's an error from the people that made the copy I posted.
The one thing that we were going
really
to get.
excited about.
I wasn't that excited about it.
I was excited.
It would be the one big thing to tie in to the major series that's more than just like history and lore. And it's like, oh, by the way, that's not.
Oh, that was cut that one. Oops.
Yeah. I've always kind of assumed that we're just never going to know, like there's no backstory to it. So when I saw that we would learn about it, I was like, oh, that's neat. Cool. All right.
I think my favorite comment from George, just because it crushes fellow moderator Sam R's dreams, is basically George saying that he's probably never going to come back to the Avalon series.
Womp womp.
Sam, we're sorry.
Well, he said, no, I don't think anyone is ever going to do anything with Avalon. However, this leaves it open that Sam, if he wants to take it up and write his own Avalon and like talk to George and like, hey, let me take care of it.
That sounds like Sam.
There you go, Sam.
Sam, here you go. This is your project.
That'd be the weirdest crusade ever. Like, I'm bringing back the sci-fi series nobody really remembers.
I mean, Sam remembers it. So.
It's amazing that it's not even, like, in this comment, too, where he says, no, I don't think anyone's ever going to do anything with Avalon. He does say that he hopes someday to return to this other novel that he had in mind that's a little less well-known than Avalon.
What is it, more tough voyaging? What are we talking about?
God, that's gotta hurt for Sam. I don't know, it's called Black and White and Red All Over. What is that? I genuinely didn't know what it was.
Never heard of
A
it.
bloody newspaper.
A zebra in a blender.
A nun falling downstairs.
What are we talking about?
A penguin rolling in cochimeal.
An Oreo with barbecue sauce.
Black and White and Red All Over, I just found. It's a novel that George R. R. Martin is working on based on the story of Jack the Ripper. And
What?
he's published
Really?
part of it in a anthology back in 2001, but it was basically a fragment that he hadn't. As he does, he published an unfinished fragment of unedited manuscript and called it a short story. Not that I'm bitter.
And of course, so we know that Fire and Blood is on its way down the pipeline later this year. But as for the main series, people have pulled out in some threads that maybe we aren't going to see anything new from that for at least the rest of this year. For example, Mr. Who 995 in their thread, his thread, points out that George probably isn't going to be releasing any more sample chapters and feels like he's released too many. And then fellow moderator JFong86 has another thread where it debunks the idea that George is also working on A Dream of Spring at the moment. And at the bottom of that is a question that is asked by other fellow moderator Brendan Beefish as to whether or not Winds could be published like Fire and Blood, separated into 2 different volumes. And George says that some of my publishers have suggested breaking up Winds as we did with Feast and Dance. I am resisting that notion. So...
Yeah, that was kind of spicy. I mean, I think we've speculated on that for a long time, that Winds should be broken into 2 volumes, right? That's been a dead horse for a while.
Aaron has.
So it's interesting to hear him talk about it.
Yeah, I speculated on that before the start of season 6, that they might want to do that before that got there. But then, like, last year I made that post that it might be covered over 2 volumes just based on, like, binding amounts, like it might have to be broken up. And I think that's what kind of Jeff was asking here.
Yeah.
But George took it as, like, a Feast and a Dance with Dragons break apart. I think maybe Jeff was fishing for how long is the book? Or
Yeah.
you gone over 1,500.
Yeah.
But George either resisted or said like, no, it's not that long yet.
Right.
So
I mean, Jeff has actually legit really said that he would want part of it to release first. So I think he actually meant that in this same way that Fire and Blood is being released.
He probably just wants all the battles in one book, and then he'll just be good.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
I also find it funny that his editors have been like, you know what we'll do this time? We'll split the book into 2, and he'll get them both out. It's like, we've been down this path, guys. Do you really think this is going to work out?
Yeah.
It's going to be another 5 years until the 2nd volume of Winds of Winter comes out.
Oh.
I kind of think he doesn't ever want to do that because it almost guarantees that he won't get a Hugo, like what would happen with Feast and Dance.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
For it. I think he's still he's fishing for that Missed a Storm of Swords Hugo.
I think you might be right. Yeah.
It was, of course, beaten by J.K. Rowling.
Yes, it was. For not the best Harry Potter book. Yikes.
Ooh, hot take.
Hot take. Yeah, I like this though because it's a good window into what must be just an absolutely hilarious backstory over the last 7 years of the publishers trying to, squeeze whatever possible book they can get out of George, and him going, no.
No,
Wait,
they keep
wait.
squeezing the stone, and they keep getting wild cards in Targaryen history.
That's right. Yeah.
And Grohl, I would read your memoir.
Seriously.
That'd be a good
Write
book. I'm in for it.
Yeah. I'm telling you guys, 20 years from now, Kit Harington playing George R. R. Martin in a tell-all biopic, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
If it's not in the works already, they're not smart.
True. Yeah. True.
Young GRRM, where he's sitting there writing to comic book writers
Yeah.
and playing with his turtles.
Yeah. But like
Aw, I love
at
it.
like 10 years old, but he already has the beard and everything. Yeah.
Kit Harington playing a 10-year-old.
Yeah. Kit Harington plays him at every age.
More like Kid Harrington.
Ooh.
I love growing up in Bayonne, New Jersey, says Kit Harington.
Do you think you can do a New Jersey accent?
He can barely do his own accent, so I don't. No, I'm just kidding. That was too spicy. I had no cause for
spicy.
That was a
Yikes.
I just want the climactic scene where he's sitting there typing away on Avalon, then he has flashes of Bran sitting in his eyes, and all of a sudden he just it flashes back to him sitting at the computer and he presses the big delete key just straight vertically with his index finger.
And then you cut straight to Sam with a single tear going down his face.
This Australian boy who's 2 years. No, Sam wasn't even born.
Yeah.
In the future, it's like a Julie and Julia with Sam and George R. R. Martin.
That is a fascinating place. That's the first movie comparison your mind went to on that one. Julie.
It's a good movie, Michael.
I mean, I'm not criticizing. I just yeah. That's a good artistic comparison. He did answer some things in the comments that were sort of they did have to do with lore and the plot and all that. One of the interesting answers was someone asked him point blank, Martin, did Robb love Jon more than Theon?
Ooh.
And he replies and says, almost certainly. Which I can't believe, first off, a question that direct got just a straight up answer. But I guess he thought it was obvious enough. I mean,
really? Because people have asked about Brienne.
I'm surprised the reply is almost certainly. I would have thought that...
Keep reading.
I don't know, maybe Robb hadn't thought of it before. Maybe he was just he almost loved them both equally.
Yeah, it's very unambiguous, I guess, which is what surprised me. It makes sense, though. It makes sense that Jon and Robb are those brotherly figures.
George often does answer direct questions, but not about things that he's not done working with, I guess. So if you ask him something about Game of Thrones that he thinks is a plot that he's finished with, he'll tell you what happened. It's the stuff that's still going on that is something he cares about. So I guess to him, maybe that Robb is dead. That's not really a mystery worth exploring anymore.
That's a good point.
That kind of thing.
That's a very good point. Someone want to do the smudge one?
I'll do the smudge one since I commented.
Sounds good.
Oh, if I can find it.
It's right here
somebody
in the doc.
asked, George, quite a busy post. I asked a question before on your live journal, and considering there's so much activity here, I thought I'd ask again. Just curious, would you be willing to share what POV you've worked on most recently in The Winds of Winter? Thanks, smiley face.
Nice.
Personally, Bran is my favorite character, and I'm really excited to see where his story goes, so hoping you're working on his chapters. I also think his endgame is the most difficult to speculate about. All the same, I'll keep reading. Thanks, and hope all is well. And Germ replied, Smudge.
So
Smudge. That was his entire reply. Smudge with a period.
Yep. That's the POV.
That's his POV.
Yeah.
A lot of speculation on who the POV is.
I was going to throw out the obvious one. It's clearly Quentin. Quentin's alive.
Because he's basically just a smudge at this point.
Yeah.
Of blackened bones.
That was my initial thought, that it was some character who got crushed and they had just been a smudge on a wall or something.
Burned to death, yeah.
At some point. Yeah, something like that. Or, but some other people speculate maybe it actually is Arya. And it's one of her, whatever her name is, her nom de plumes.
I mean, of all the characters who have aliases, Smudge. That I could see Arya being Smudge.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's just him being coy, but it's possible that it's a secret answer in there. Maybe when we finally get The Winds of Winter and he does a blog post about Smudge or so, he'll mention it again. We'll go, oh my gosh, it all makes sense now. It was actually Sir Boros Blount. Who's now a
classic POV character.
It could have been also that George had typed it out, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't say this, Smudge.
Or there's something on his screen, and he's dictating through Dragon. He's like, oh, there's a smudge right there.
There's a smudge on my window. That's the one. I'll just say it's Smudge.
Oh, did I answer a question? Whatever.
Maybe he meant to write Sansa, but autocorrect wrote Smudge on his phone instead.
That's quite an autocorrect. That's a pretty drastic one.
I don't know.
Or maybe Smudge is the new POV.
Yeah.
He's actually added a new POV. Smudge.
I don't believe anymore that he won't add POVs. I think there's a non-zero chance we're going to see a new point of view. That's my controversial hot take.
Yeah, Ghost. Ghost POV.
Ghost is kind of a smudge. If you get a little bit of ink in his fur or something, there's a little smudge there.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Smear of pink Ghost.
Oh, please don't. All right.
Did anybody have like a serious answer to what they thought smudge was?
There were like actual serious answers. There was a
Okay.
discussion somewhere, but I don't know where. I don't know where it
Yeah.
lives. I saw it. And I was
We're
like,
great
okay,
moderators.
I mean, I
doing
feel
great.
like there's nothing to go on, so you can discuss it seriously, but like, it's not like there's evidence.
I do wonder if George was just saying smudge because he wanted to like see people speculate on it wildly to see where it went.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's like, let me turn into reddit.com/r Song of Ice and Fire. Let's see what people are saying.
Ultimate troll move.
Yeah, like if he had typed random characters, we would have been trying to figure out how he encrypted his answer, like what substitution cipher he was using, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like he kept saying son of Kong. We all knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
now he has to get more esoteric with it. Well, in the last month or so, there have been quite a lot of great posts that have nothing to do with George's comments on Fire and Blood. And one of those posts, which was posted on May 6th by user, all caps, IDELNHAW, I assume that's pronounced IDELNHAW, posted a post titled Trees in ASOIAF. And the first header in here is counting every tree in ASOIAF. So you know it's a high quality analysis. But it really is. It dives into a lot talking about the symbolism behind certain trees being associated with certain characters and how many trees pop up and what different kinds of trees pop up in different points of view, chapters. It's just a nice breakdown, I think, of something that could be seen as just scene setting, but given how important trees are in the story, especially weirwood trees, maybe a little more intentional. So, what did you guys think of this post?
Should I just go wild?
Oh, Matt, do you have something to say about it?
I thought the most interesting thing about this whole breakdown they found is that it's not weirwoods that's mentioned the most. It's actually the oak tree. And based on how much the old gods factor in and how much the different characters from the north think about them, you'd assume they'd be far and away the most, especially considering Bran, who actually has the most weirwood mentions. You think just over and over and over again thinking about them. But no, George really wants you to think about oak trees, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing because in the south, the oak trees are kind of used as replacement weirwoods. At the castle that they stay at, I think it's at Castle Derry, the weirwood is gone there, so they use an oak tree as the quote-unquote heart tree of their godswood.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of connections between oak trees and different mythological figures like Zeus and Thor and Jupiter. And just based on the way the story's going and how often the weirwoods are mentioned, it's unusual that like essentially the storm god is getting more call-outs in the trees that are being mentioned than anything else.
Aries oak tree heart?
Yeah.
Aries oak tree heart. So do you think it's because oaks are like a quote-unquote generic tree or because there's significance there?
They have a lot of significance in a lot of ancient cultures, so I think it's kind of a call-out in that way. Like a lot of European cultures really valued oak trees, not only within their mythologies, but in sort of worship kind of things. And they sort of got cut down as Christianity swept through Europe. So a lot of people think that weirwoods are oaks, but they're not quite there. And it's odd that he's kind of hyping them up. But even among his fake trees, the other one that comes in is the sentinel tree, which that's kind of a fake one too. The weirwood and the sentinels aren't real, basically.
Sure.
What's the tree that's on Dunk's sigil? The one that he's like sitting underneath?
Oh.
That's an elm tree. And actually, there's a great comment in the thread about elm trees from user Joan Jeff, which points out some similarities between elms and Dunk. They say elms are immense trees, very tall. They provide ample shade, but their leaves decompose. You might say they're low maintenance.
Like Dunk.
Exactly. And they also say they were once the dominant tree in American towns and cities, but Dutch elm disease wiped them out. The same way Dunk was once the most respected knight, but wildfire wiped him out. Which,
that's just
Dutch
sad.
elm disease, wildfire, it's like the same thing.
yeah, exactly. Dunk elm disease. Am I right? Dunk elm
Oh my god.
disease. Anyway, so yeah, there was some good talk of Dunk and elm in there. Yeah.
A lot of people draw connections between A Song of Ice and Fire and Norse mythology, particularly Yggdrasil, the world tree, especially because it's called out with Ygg, the demon tree, from Ironborn mythology. But the ash tree, which is actually what Yggdrasil was, barely gets mentioned, only 29 times. So for something that people assume should be all over the place, it's relatively unmentioned among characters, especially among the characters you'd think, as Bran has a lot of connections to the Fenris wolf, and Bloodraven has a lot of connections to Odin, but or like Robert to Thor and things like that. So it's interesting the things George is focusing on and the tree meanings versus what people think he's actually talking about most of the time.
Sure, yeah.
Obviously, when we think of House Ironwood with a Y in Dorne, you think that they're probably named after the Ironwood trees, but they say that they can't be named after the Ironwood trees because Ironwood trees tend to grow north of the neck, and that rather the name might come from their lands being well timbered and possessed of valuable deposits of iron, tin, and silver, as pointed out in the World of Ice and Fire.
That's true. There's some other ways to think about that, though, in that Ironwood trees in the north are often we see them most often in like gates and large doors, like the crypts of Winterfell are ironwood doors. And then you get the gates called back in like the Gates of the Moon from the Vale. And it's sort of asked the question because we know there's a cataclysm that happened in Dorne with the Shattering. Perhaps in the long past there were ironwood trees all the way down in Dorne since the ironwoods are first met.
Yeah.
And ever since the children destroyed the habitat, maybe they've gone extinct from that part of the world.
To back, I don't know if I can't remember if you just said this or not, so forgive me. But the sigil of House Ironwood is a black portcullis gate over, like it's an ironwood gate basically, right? So,
right. And ironwoods are extremely hard and extremely hardwood, and they're mostly black, so they would look like iron in a sigil, basically. That might not be actual iron in the sigil. That might be wood.
Right.
Yeah. And they could have always migrated, like, if it's didn't used to be there, because they are still said to be...
First men, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting catch.
Yeah, I liked the connection though to the World of Ice and Fire, because no matter where the ironwoods come from, it is like it's a clever tie. Well-timbered lands with lots of iron.
Sure.
One that I liked from this post was the association between redwoods and Catelyn. If only because I feel like redwoods don't show up in fantasy enough. It's usually like traditional European trees, and you don't get as many American ones. So I think it's pretty dope that George included some good West Coast trees. But also this idea of longevity being associated with the redwoods, and obviously the red hair of the Tullys and there's some kind of literal imagery there.
They're very noble trees, just like the Tullys.
Yeah, very, very sort of tall, straight, noble trees.
One other thing that I thought was well pointed out they also provided a whole table of all these things. When you look at the characters that most often even mention trees, you see Bran, Jon, Arya, Dunk, Brienne, Catelyn, Tyrion, and Daenerys. Now, most of those are characters who follow the northern religion of the old gods, so they're going to notice, or at least they're aware of the northern religion, so they're going to notice trees more often than not. But then the other characters are just sort of characters who are out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Like you don't see like characters like Cersei or Arianne mentioning trees a lot just because that's where they are. But it makes sense even on like just a planning level for thinking about as characters. Yes, old god followers would notice trees much more often than anyone else. That kind of thing.
Blood orange trees.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh my god.
And where is the lemon trees in this post?
Let's not go there.
No, let's
and just a quick shout out on Twitter for the account Westerosi Lorax, where they talk about a lot of these things, where they connect real life botanical knowledge to the A Song of Ice and Fire trees and what they mean and how they grow and how George is using them. I might be a tree nerd, but I think it's a very good Twitter account. I get a lot out of it.
And it's not you.
It's not me. I do not run that account. I don't run it.
It's a dog eat dog wood world.
I wish you cotton wouldn't.
Aaron.
That's the segue out.
Ba-dum-bum.
So our next post comes from user BaelBard, and it's "Someone Always Tells Who Betrayed Arianne Martell." They introduce it with, "As you all know, Arianne Martell's infamous Queenmaker plot has failed after Doran Martell learned about it, and Myrcella got crippled in the confrontation. While she was being arrested, Arya Hota told Arianne that someone betrayed her and revealed her plan to Doran. And the identity of this traitor is still a mystery to us and Arianne. So who is it?" They link another post which talks about a lot of the main suspects and pros and cons for each of them. And BaelBard debunks a couple of them, saying that Arya's makes no sense, because if he wanted to stop the Queenmaker plot, all he had to do was not deliver Myrcella to Arianne. And it's not Geraldine either, because Doran's plan is Quentin, he didn't need Myrcella dead, and he's not a person to order the death of a child, and then that the other main suspects are Andrew Dalt, Garen the Orphan, and Silva Santagar, Arianne's friends, and BaelBard says it's not any of them, because essentially we don't know anything about these characters and they aren't actually significant to Arianne's plot as much, and they summarize it in the line of, "Who gives a shit if it's any of these three people?" So rather they propose that the treason has to be someone who has narrative weight and means a lot to Arianne, and is a character that we would be more familiar with because their name's mentioned more often, which is Tyene Sand. So BaelBard argues that it's Tyene because Arianne keeps stressing how close they are, that they are dear friends, that they have no secrets between them, that they share a bed, and then that Arianne sees Tyene as a friend and a sister. But on the other hand, we have another POV that also characterizes Tyene for us, Arya Hota. And, man, Aaron's gonna have to, edit a lot of bleeps into this. Arya's POV shows us a completely different woman. Tyene is a scary, fun person who seems innocent, but is, in fact, maybe the most dangerous of the Sand Snakes, and that Doran seems to think so as well. Then they say that Tyene is working for Aegon, maybe Septa Lemore is Tyene's mother, and that Tyene is working with Varys, and that they throw the Queenmaker plot awry to help prop up Aegon.
That was a good job summarizing that post. There was
excellent work.
It's a lot. It's a dense post, but it's got a lot of pretty solid logic.
So I agree with probably maybe 75% of this post. First off, I like it a lot. I think it's great, and I'm always interested in more Dornish stuff. I really like the idea that Tyene is the one who sold out Arianne, if only because of they make a good case here that Tyene is the person Arianne we're told she trusts the most, and yet Tyene can't be involved in the Queenmaker plot. She's absent. She is in fact being held prisoner in the same place where Doran is. She says we're told that they have no secrets between them, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that Tyene is dangerous. So I think there's a lot there. I don't necessarily agree on the motive. I'm not sure I buy that Tyene is part of some sort of conspiracy with Aegon and Varys and all that. Just because I don't know how much I buy that. I guess it's possible, but there would have to be a lot coming up in the Winds of Winter to give that some more foundation and not have it just seem kind of weird. And I don't know. That part of the post I'm weak on.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that as well. It could just be that Tyene thought that this was not the best plan.
Right.
And she's thinking out more of what she would think would be the best course of action for Dorne. So she doesn't have to have a tie-in to any of the other factions.
A tie-in.
She could just be looking out for Tyene as it is. I mean, as a result of this, doesn't she get sent to King's Landing? Which puts her in a perfect position to strike at the Lannisters, which is what she really wants.
Absolutely, yeah.
She gains trust with Duran and becomes his envoy. I mean, that's a pretty good prize right there. I don't think you need more than that.
And I would also, I think there's enough motivation there that maybe she wants to sabotage the Queenmaker plot and maybe tries to set it up so that Myrcella will die. Is trying to arrange this violent ambush where there's a good chance Myrcella will get killed in the crossfire or something. That this is her trying to start a war or something. So yeah, I don't necessarily think it has to. It doesn't rely on Aegon. I agree, Aaron. It doesn't need that to work. Yeah, I mean, what do you guys think?
I think it follows a great logic that George sometimes employs, where he kind of gives you a bunch of options. He just kind of throws them at you at the narrative, and they all kind of make sense. But sometimes it's like the one you never thought of. Like when you think with RLJ, like he throws Wyla, Ashara, the fisherman's daughter at you for John's mother, and it's actually none of them. It's actually Liana, which is backed up more in the text, but nobody thinks of it. And that's kind of similar to what we're seeing here. Tyene, I mean, the points they lay out and the quotes they bring out, I think are great. I think they probably nailed that it was Tyene, maybe not the motive so much. And that seems to be in line with George's method of presenting mysteries to his readers.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I up until now, I would say I'd kind of bought that it was, I think someone made a good case that it was Silva Santagar, because she's the one who gets a pretty decent marriage out of the whole thing, which I could also see that. I mean, maybe it's not a big mystery and it's just Silva and, you know, it's in the background. But if it is somebody more significant, it's totally got to be Tyene now. That's what I think.
Silva, I think it's like sent off that she's marrying somebody who's old and nearly ready to go or something, but it's not like a good marriage for her that she would be happy in.
Yes. True. She's married to the like ancient, I think he's like 70 or 80 years old, Lord Estermont, which, yeah, I mean, it basically means she's going to be a widow pretty soon. But you could take that as a softer punishment, maybe.
Yeah, which has a lot of complications.
Yeah. Those things don't always go right. Some bastard or some cousin could show up claiming the seat from the wife. That could totally happen.
Yeah, and she has to find. It's like the Lysa situation up in the Vale, like
exactly.
We'll get into a bit later. But
yeah,
so it could be a fortuitous marriage. It could be not.
It could also be very clever from Duran that he's rewarding people that did not betray Arianne, so that it throws cover on Tyene as he sends her off. Arya never thinks of it because it's like, well, Tyene is no better off. But all these people are being rewarded, so it must be one of them.
This is Doran's 3D chess, right?
Oh, no.
He thinks he plays 3D chess. Maybe this is the one time he actually tricks somebody.
If he can trick anyone, it's Arianne. No, I'm just kidding.
Or himself. He can trick himself.
You played yourself, Doran. You sent Tyene to King's Landing. You dumbass.
If you can trick a wrench, you can trick a Quentin ball.
That sounds like a quote from A Song of Ice and Fire. Do you guys think that the Sand Snake plot in the books is anywhere similar to the kind of the plan that the Sand Snakes from the show have, where they're all working in concert, or do you think they're kind of all out for themselves?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I've never thought about this.
Just sort of came to my head as I was listening.
I mean,
it's a good question.
I don't think that their storyline's going to go down exactly like it did in the show, but like as for what your question is exactly, give me like a moment to think.
Okay, you guys can have a moment.
It could be also that it's like which one of them thinks that they're Oberyn's true heir, who is his true daughter, and they're all like playing against each other.
We see that with Robb and Jon.
It does seem somewhat pertinent, right, that George R. R. Martin has given each of them very distinct personalities. Like in the show, they're presented very cohesively, like they all have the same color palette and come in a pack together, but in the books, they each are characterized as looking very differently, having different personalities, and even the way that they dress is so distinctly different from one another. So,
yeah.
Granted, then again, maybe all of them seeming so different could like belie that they're all working together on some plot. I don't know. I don't know.
In the show, they're kind of presented as like the Dornish Avengers, where it's like they're all a team ready to go, and
they think they're the A team, but they're really the D team.
Ooh,
yeah, they kind of failed.
That was a good burn. I think that before they were imprisoned by Doran in the books, they were not necessarily working together. That they were all just sort of like flying off the handle, trying to get revenge for Oberyn in whatever way possible. I think after they were imprisoned and spent, weeks together in a tower, locked up together, they put together a plan or a plot or something. And, coming back to this post even then, maybe Tyene knew about the Queenmaker plot, but it was really Lady Nim's idea to use it as, fodder for, getting the band back together or whatever. This could have been them working in concert after they were imprisoned. So I think we'll see them work together more going forward. I don't think before that they were necessarily on the same page.
I like that take, especially because basically what you're saying is that Duran imprisoned them because he thought they were a threat, and they really weren't before. But now they're together, and they might now be a bigger threat than they used to be.
Yes.
He created his own enemy.
Yes.
This seems like a classic Doran screw-up.
Yeah, this seems like a thing that would happen to Doran.
Look,
one of us should write this up. This is actually good.
That's fire. Yeah. Doran looks into the camera. I've done it again.
More oranges fall.
One orange on its own doesn't hurt very much, but imagine if someone threw all of the oranges, a cascade of oranges at you. 5 or 8 oranges all at once.
What would the Doran sitcom be called? What would the
Orange, you glad I didn't say what banana?
I'll take it. Sold. Roland Waynwood.
I have a post here on Roland Waynwood. Okay.
You guys, we
this
can't
is a post
clap.
by Hyperdrunk. Oh, maybe that's because I'm Hyperdunk.
Maybe you're also hyper drunk.
I need to remake the Flare of Wild. It's got a couple things going on with it, but
don't worry, we're losing all the flares soon, so it's fine.
Roland Waynwood and why he matters for Yohn Royce's grand scheme. And this post is about the Veil chapters, which I think are an underappreciated source of fun, exciting plot developments, especially because Littlefinger, the schemer who started the entire series, moving around the Veil, pulling a couple strings, getting things involved. I think Sansa's chapters are going to be a lot more fulfilling and exciting than people kind of think of right now, or maybe even that D&D thought of.
Preach.
But this post is about what Yohn Royce is up to. And I agree with some of it. I don't know how much of it, but the post is about what is Roland Waynwood actually up to in the Veil. Sansa is supposed to be going and suiting up to marry Harold Harding, but Roland is kind of putting some game on out here as trying to woo Sansa.
Woo.
And it kind of goes back to this conversation that Hyperdrunk talks about that Rob has with Catelyn a long time ago as to who would be the heir of Winterfell if he were to fall. And the Waynwoods are actually quite up there in the hierarchy of things. It's not, I think, clear that it would definitely be the Waynwoods, but they have a very strong claim to it. And it could be because of Royce having tie-ins with Waynwood. Maybe he is backing Roland getting close to Sansa as Elaine Stone.
They're saying that Yohn Royce is playing it so that Roland ends up in a marriage alliance with Sansa, and Harry Harding takes control of the Veil.
Right.
So that Yohn Royce, as opposed to Littlefinger, would have control of both the North and the Veil.
Right, Jan's the puppet master here. The Waynwoods have been Royce's closest allies, and they've been the most faithful with them out of all the Vale houses. That's what they argue.
Maybe Yohn is going to be making a play on both the North through Sansa. Maybe, as Eliana was saying, that he knows that she's actually Sansa, or does he? He does get a look at her.
I would say Yohn definitely knows who she is.
He gets, because Randa Royce, as this user, Hyperdrunk, points out, Randa Royce asks some pretty pointed questions of Elaine, including, I believe she's the one who asks, what's Ned's bastard's name again? And Elaine immediately goes, oh, you mean Jon Snow? And then Randa's like, oh, yeah, who the heck would know that? I think that's what they're building on here, is the idea that, Randa Royce, as part of the Yohn Royce NSA, is reporting back to headquarters with the news. Yeah,
His spy network, yeah.
That Elaine is Sansa Stark. And I mean, it's not a crazy... This is tangentially related, but I feel like one of the weaknesses of the 5-year gap that's kind of under-discussed is, could Littlefinger really have convinced everyone in the Vale for 5 straight years that this was not Sansa Stark? Like, would no one have figured that out? Because it's a little too convenient. Yeah, so I could believe that Yohn figures it out.
Yeah, the post ends in summation that Yohn Royce sees the Lannister Tyrell throne as the enemy and Littlefinger as part of the extension of Lannister power, and that I do think it's pretty clear that Royce does not want Littlefinger to be in control of the Vale.
Totally.
Right.
And that he's looking for a way to maybe get rid of him, and working a way around that was seeing Sansa and figuring out what this deal with Elaine is would be a clear way to gain 2 different major regions and maybe turning the tides against the Lannisters. But at the same time, I think right now he's kind of just trying to regain control over everything that's been lost, because Littlefinger he's winning ground in the Vale pretty damn quickly.
He's turned most of the Lord's Declarant against Yohn.
Oh, yeah.
And Yohn, he already knows who Sansa is. Yohn is I would call him kind of like a highborn manipulator. He's almost like a spy master himself. He knows who Harold Harding is. He knows like all these other random people throughout the Vale. He's seen Sansa in Winterfell. She actually saw Sansa crush on his son, Waymar. And then he saw her again in King's Landing at the Hands tourney, and also with Ned. There's no way he doesn't know who she is. He probably would have recognized her right away.
This is true, because he is present in the room when Sansa is there.
Yep.
I think at the beginning of A Feast.
And his sons.
Yeah. Well, most of his sons are dead now.
He has one still alive.
He has one still alive, and he has a daughter who is being married to
Michael Redfort.
Michael Redfort, the infamous Michael Redfort, who, if Littlefinger has a little scheme up his paw, he may end up trying to get rid of Yohn by giving Runestone to Michael Redfort through Ysilla, which could be a big plot, because Michael Redfort's been around since the Game of Thrones. Not a major character, but he is mentioned. I think it kind of shows up. I think he shows up escorting Catelyn. I can't remember, but he is mentioned. He's a long-term player. Yeah,
when she was mentioning who the Starks married into, then she mentioned the Redforts as one of the daughters that went there.
Also, Miranda is the daughter of Nestor, not Yohn.
You're right. Yeah, I messed that up.
Oh yeah.
They're still cousins, though. I mean,
and I think it's significant to point out that Littlefinger seems to be trying to split up the loyalties within House Royce.
Yeah, because he gave the Gates of the Moon, which Lysa had spurned from him, to Nestor.
Yeah.
It actually kind of wasn't Littlefinger's to give away. That's the summer home of the Arryns, because they can't live in the Eyrie during the winter. He gave away one of their major castles. That's a huge bribe.
All part of this is what makes the Vale really interesting, is how it's not really clear who is playing which houses and who are the allies. It makes it more classically George R. R. Martin, A Song of Ice and Fire political.
Yeah. I think something that makes the Vale gives it room to be interesting is that these people are all playing the Game of Thrones. It's not like you have a Cersei who is just willfully basically going mad. She's killing people and just ousting houses at random and things like that. And it's not like you have the Tyrells who have consolidated power so well that any uprisings by the Florents, for example, are just kind of squashed pretty quickly. But in the Riverlands, that's been settled kind of through open warfare and just the extermination of houses. But in the Vale, you still have this really rich feudal politics. I mean, it shows. You have this post that is clearly, I would call it maybe about 1,000 words, about a guy named Roland Waynwood, who, I mean, obviously there's a lot to talk about here, but frankly, barely in the book, right? I mean, there's a lot of depth under these sort of briefly mentioned Vale characters.
That's true. I would also say... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to go in a slightly different direction, so if this is still here.
I was going to go Lord of the Rings, so if it's closer
Eliana,
than that...
Yeah. It's closer than that. Okay.
Okay.
And I wonder if a lot of it is because this is such a pivotal moment in the political situation in the Vale. There's that power vacuum, of course, left by Jon Arryn's death, and leaving it with Lysa, who has essentially been pitting a lot of the houses against one another and catering to different whims, of course.
Yeah.
And then she passes, and suddenly there's a scramble for who's going to take control of the Vale, with Robert Arryn being too young to be able to really do anything. And it's also interesting to think that the Vale now is very much not. It either is very similar to or very different from the one that Ned Stark grew up in. And of course, you know, we have a lot of close connections between House Royce and the Starks, as user Craw68 points out, that a lot of the current Starks are related to the Royces as well. And I think that it is important to note that if Yohn Royce does recognize Sansa, that Ned probably fostered a lot of goodwill amongst people in the Vale while he was a ward there. So there could be, along with that political ambition from House Royce, as well as them knowing that they have some of these blood ties with the North, there could even be some of that emotional and personal connection.
That's a good point. That's important to remember, yeah. That the Starks have a very recent personal tie to the Vale.
It would make for some good writing, and also, like, I could almost take an entire book, like the size of a Game of Thrones or a Clash of Kings inside the Vale. Another thing that also contrasts well is we have these two mostly untouched kingdoms down in Dorne and up in the Vale.
Yes.
And the Dorne plot is mostly revolving around the Martells and more of like a TV sitcom kind of in a way, like scheming way, where the Vale is more like grand political. Which we have all these like grand theories and schemes and stuff, but that the fans speculate on, but they normally don't tend to revolve around the Vale, which is kind of like the fertile ground for where you would expect like something of that to come from.
Exactly. This was my Lord of the Rings thing I was going to go into. This almost feels like almost a Numeronian or Elvish politics that they're talking about. Like Yohn Royce is caring about like who's the actual heir, like Harold Harding, going back through like all these crazy trees going upwards and backwards. Like it's very Tolkien-esque the way Yohn Royce is trying to play Vale politics, but Littlefinger is almost injecting GRRM's realism into like a fantasy realm. Like he's coming in and he's messing everything up in the way that like Gondor wouldn't exist the way you think it is, because of like all the houses that are like competing with each other, and like that the stewards wouldn't actually sit there and wait for a king. Like Littlefinger is GRRM running in and like giving an uppercut to Gondor.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying.
I don't know what that means, but I guess it's great.
Have both Aaron and I
It sounds good, doesn't it?
Have both Aaron and I never read Lord of the Rings?
I watched the movies once.
Same. When I was a wee lass.
You're close enough. You understand
All
it.
right.
How they're also like noble and perfect, and they follow Aragorn because he shows up because he's the rightful heir after hundreds of years. Only in the Vale would that happen.
Let me rephrase that. I watched the movies once 10 years ago.
Yeah, same.
Matt, okay, so Matt, this is for you and me then.
Right.
Why hasn't Prince
I'm in.
Imrahil seized power in Gondor? He clearly has the stronger army.
Exactly.
He's like a handsome young warlord.
Mhm.
Why hasn't he seized power from Denethor, who is a total chode? You know, like there should be more of this sort of So yeah, I get what you're saying. It's as opposed to the sort of top-down view of history as like this unbroken line of kings or at least rulers or whatever. It's this sort of bottom up where it's about the just sort of very base people who are involved in the decision making and the schemes and all that. And how sometimes that means there's continuity of power, like House Arryn stays in power, and sometimes it means there's, you know, House Royce splitting in half because Littlefinger gave a bunch of tapestries to Nestor. You know, like it.
Yeah, that's so
gets into the
Tolkien.
nitty-gritty.
And it's especially like Yohn is kind of like almost like Denethor in a way. He's a similar kind of schemer, and he has the same kind of ties.
He's a steward too.
He's a steward.
I would call him a steward.
But in George's world, the steward is trying to take the Vale. He's trying to take Gondor for himself. Whereas in Tolkien's world, he would have sat there forever as a steward and never tried anything.
Right.
It's sort of a degree of realism. Well, I'm not sure if it's realism, but it's just like maybe cynicism brought more into the real politics.
Yeah, sure.
Did you guys follow that?
I think I can latch on to that. It feels very GRRMy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And for our last subreddit highlight, we have Wyman Manderly knows about Arya from LordTryhard. All right.
It's a great name.
It's a good name, but he didn't try that hard. This is a relatively short post. But anyway.
But maybe he, it takes more time to edit.
Ooh.
There's that Mark Twain, that Mark Twain.
You're saying he's eloquent?
Yeah, that Mark Twain quote of, I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to write a shorter letter.
Fair enough. This post is about how at the Winterfell feast, Wyman Manderly asks for the night that ended and also several times to hear from the song of brave young Dany Flint and make us weep. And LordTryhard argues that this is Wyman Manderly using songs to indicate to fake Arya that he knows she's fake, that he's having them sing brave Dany Flint to communicate to her, by the way, we know you're not Arya. And then the night that ended, and to follow up to that, like, your time as Ramsay's plaything is almost over. The North is coming to help you. It's very much in line with the kind of thing that George does as a TV writer, where there's very few things wasted, especially things like this, where you look at songs like The Bear and the Maiden Fair, and that comes back multiple times. He uses that, I think, like 2 or 3 times, not just for Jaime and Brienne. And the fact that Wyman is asking drunkenly for the songs must mean something. And I think this is an exceptional catch, pointing out that Wyman is indicating to the audience and to the Northerners that are there that he knows everything that's going on. And as he says, the Mummer's farce is almost at an end.
But yeah, it does seem likely that Wyman would at least know what Arya probably looks like. One of the commenters, I'm not sure if it's pointed out elsewhere, but commenter London Goblin points out that in one of Arya's Blind Girl chapter, or House of Black and White chapters, that Kat, the orphan girl that she is, had visited White Harbor with her father twice, but she knew King's Landing better. Which, I mean, that would certainly imply, right, that Wyman Manderly has seen Arya. She's not that old, so it's likely it happened in the last couple years, somewhere between when she was cognizant of the fact she was in White Harbor and the time when the story picks up. So I think it's entirely plausible that he would recognize, he would at least squint at Jane and go, wait a second, that doesn't really look like Arya Stark.
Arya, especially because she looks so much like Ned, and Wyman is a giant Ned fan.
Ah, true, yeah. He's a Ned stan, isn't he?
He does.
He loves Ned. He loves Ned more than almost anybody.
Unless you believe that it's really that he's trying to prop up Bricken in order to take control of the North through sort of a puppet ruler, but maybe not.
Maybe. I think it sort of depends if you're feeling hopeful, if you're feeling cynical about Wyman.
I don't know if Wyman was really doing it for anybody in particular. He may have just been doing these songs for himself, like, yo, I know what's up. I'm going to have them play these songs just for my own personal benefit and my own, maybe he needs, like, some sort of...
Maybe it's for his men?
Reinforcement that his mission is okay and that he's doing the right thing. And sort of like a self-esteem boost, like, I'm getting it over on these guys, and...
Or
he
could be bragging because he has them play the Rat Cook like 3 times as he serves the phrase. So maybe he's saying to Roose and Ramsay, maybe it's not directed at Jane in an altruistic way. Maybe he's saying to them, I know your tricks. I'm inside your head. You're eating phrase right now. I know who Jane is. This is almost over.
Yeah, which there's a great discussion in the comments about whether this post is, which I absolutely love this idea that Wyman Manderly knows, and that's why the song is playing, but whether it's too judgmental of what Wyman Manderly is trying to say to Jane, whether Wyman's trying to say, you think you're going to get what you want, but you're soon going to regret it, or if rather Wyman's playing this song as sort of a have heart to Jane Poole, like a be brave, because Dany Flint is a more positive song in that Dany is the tragic heroine as opposed to not knowing her place.
Isn't Dany Flint a very sad song?
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's what user Melor88 is arguing. That Wyman playing Dany Flint is not meant to be a cautionary tale of Jane Poole trying to jump her station so much as it's meant to be maybe something that should tell Jane to have courage by pretending to be someone that you're not, and that you're supposed to feel sorry for Jane and feel sorry for Danny.
Oh, I didn't even think about it in the other way.
Right,
I assumed it was giving her heart, that he was like, we hear you, Jane.
Oh.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the OP, LordTryhard, does, I think in the post says something about, like, I doubt Wyman's too impressed about the fact that the steward's girl is impersonating the daughter of his former liege lord.
Oh.
But yeah, I would agree with Melor88 on that. Danny Flint, both in universe and to the reader, is coded as like a tragic heroine, and that Wyman, if he's dedicating this song to Jane Poole,
this goes out to my girl Jane.
Yeah. Shout out to Jane. He's on Delilah. He called into Delilah, and he's requesting. Do y'all have Delilah on your radios?
Hey there, Delilah.
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 This one goes out to Jane. No, wrong song. No.
Michael and I basically just doxed where we grew up.
I know who Delilah is.
Yeah. Was
Wait,
it just is it syndicated or is it just a DC
I don't know.
thing?
Yeah, she's syndicated.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, she's syndicated. I get her up here.
Awesome. Great. We get Delilah coast to coast.
We're only on one coast, maybe. We don't know.
That's true. Could be.
Because Aaron doesn't seem to know Delilah.
Do you have a friend or a loved one who you need to dedicate a song to? Do you have a special somebody whose heart cries out to you? Dedicate a song to them. Call in 1-800-Delilah.
Don't call that number. We don't know who has it.
All right, yeah, don't call
in asking for brave Danny Flint from Delilah, please.
Oh, yes. Can we do like a prank calls segment, like in the good old days of radio shows? Like call into Delilah requesting the Rat Cook.
Oh, so I'm going to just plug this in here. At Ice and Fire Con, someone did like a Thomas Seven Strings cosplay, and then they wrote their own incredible song about the floppy fish. And
whoa.
It's online. People should just look it up. I'm sorry. It was incredible.
That's amazing.
It was very baudy. It was very raunchy, as one would expect a song about a floppy fish to be.
Yeah. I'm glad that happened. That's a good cosplay idea, too, because that gives you an excuse to carry around a musical instrument.
Yeah.
So today on our rotating topic, we're going to be talking about debunked theories and also proven theories.
That's right. There have been a lot of theories over the 2 decades of life that A Song of Ice and Fire has had. Some of these fan theories have panned out, much to people's surprise. Others were woefully misguided from the get-go.
Oh.
So we're going to take a look at some theories, sort of a history of the fandom, a mini history of the fandom through a very specific lens. Some theories that did not come true, that the books ended up sort of disproving, and then talk about some ones that did come true. Some ideas that people had that might have seemed crazy at the time that in fact turned out to be spot on. But first, and I think it's funnier, I want to talk about the ones that never came true, that have ended up
smudge
on the scrap heap of time. The smudges. Several years ago on the subreddit, a user by the name of YZerman2Lidstrom, I guess that's how you pronounce, I'm not going to make any better attempts, posted a thread called A Clash of Kings Theories. And this was 4 years ago. What?
It's Iserman to Lidstrom. It's a hockey thing.
Iserman
to Lidstrom.
All right. This Canadian person posted a thread titled A Clash of Kings Theories, where they were going through old Google group archives, as you do, and came across a thread about theories that will happen in the books that come after A Game of Thrones. And this thread was posted in January 1998, so before Book 2 had even come out.
Oof.
So there's a great list of theories in here, some of which are on point, some of which are not. A lot of them focus on the Night's Watch, then think the Night's Watch is going to be really important in the next book. One that stands out is that the Night's Watch will get entirely wiped out in A Clash of Kings, which How would you guys rate that as like came true, didn't come true? Because I could,
I think it's decidedly untrue. I mean, they still exist.
But the Fist of the First Men happens right at the beginning of Storm, like.
But they got reinforced. They added the wildlings and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that one was completely.
But I don't disagree with their analysis that it might happen, because all we learn about the Night's Watch through the first few books is how they are crumbling and how they're terrible and how they're not made of real warriors and that, like, they're on the brink of collapse.
That's true. Especially, yeah, I mean, and if you think the series is going to be 4 books long, you could assume that by the end of book 2, things will be drastically different.
Yeah. I mean, even Tyrion's commentary when he's talking to Jon is like, what do you think you're joining?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, that right there should set up in your mind like, wow, the Night's Watch is probably dead.
Yeah. There's another really good one in here that I have fallen in love with, and I can't believe that we're not going to get to see it. Namely, sort of a love triangle kind of thing. Except it's not really, well, it's kind of a triangle. The idea that Jon will bone Catelyn and have a child with her. And I want to read the original post here from this person, because I feel like it deserves to be read.
And we're now entering Maester Monthly After Dark.
This is Maester Monthly's Delilah hour here.
This one goes out to my girl Kat. I'm Jon Snow.
So the original post way back in January 1998 was, I thought about Catelyn Stark, this person says. Why? Foremost, because it would make for such a potent scandal. Smiley face, as Jon's partner. Think about it, they say. Throughout the years, Catelyn has made sure that Jon will never look on her as a mother. Catelyn now is, I think, ashamed of her behavior towards Jon and wants to try to make things up. She is raw with grief after losing her husband. Emphasis on raw. She has also thought about having another baby with Ned. Jon, on the other hand, is growing into a man, looking much like Eddard Stark. He is probably reluctant to go to Molestown and get laid, honor and stuff.
Oh my God.
But on the other hand, he's a teenager, ready to explode with hormones. And Catelyn is a pretty sexy lady, or so I hear, smiley face. So that was the original post on this topic. After hearing it, how hot of a bath do you want to take to cleanse yourself of these?
Sure, after finding out about Einhorn.
Yeah, right.
Just sitting there scrubbing the skin with steel wool.
Yeah. It's kind of fascinating.
That would take a lot of plot development to arrive at that point that the books did not have on the surface.
I mean, it's a common construction in a lot of porn, and it doesn't take a lot of plot to get to that point. So I don't see why we need a lot of plot to get to that point for Jon and Catelyn.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe like Jon starts part-timing as like a pizza delivery guy, and Kat orders some grief pizza, and, Jon knocks on...
No, her boiler's on the fritz.
He fixes the cable.
Yeah, no, he knocks on the door, and, he says, oh, I've got some sausage pizza for you. I've got a 12-inch.
Good God.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think George writes above the quality of browsers. I'm just going to throw that out there.
That's a controversial statement.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it speaks some to like people's expectations from A Song of Ice and Fire before it sort of established itself as what it is. If you're going in and all you kind of think about it is like, oh, it's this kind of racy, incesty fantasy story that really goes all in on the creepy stuff and doesn't shy away from uncomfortable things. Could someone come drawing this conclusion? And as a follow-up, is our modern-day Jonsa ship just the sanitized version of this?
Ooh, that's a spicy take.
I don't want to talk about the pitch letter right now.
It's hard to put myself into that 1999 mindset as far as like what else was on. What else would I have read?
If you're reading fantasy, it would have been mostly Tolkien stuff, inspired by that. I don't think it's an unreasonable idea, just on the value of what George is doing with the sexuality of his characters. It's just like, why? Why would you do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I can see the template for that, but the actual characters themselves don't really move in that direction at all in A Game of Thrones, and it's insane to see that. But, you know, you very generously could see the template for where someone could apply this idea to Game of Thrones. That's about as nice as I can be to that theory.
It could have gone 50 Shades of Grey, I guess, in that direction.
I mean, if you read Jorda's other works, I mean, it's not that far off that something that crazy would happen. I mean, you look at like Night Flyers and Meathouse Man; those are well beyond the craziness that we see in A Song of Ice and Fire.
Well, and like,
so maybe if you're a fan of his for decades,
well, and not even George, but like Eliana, you bring up a lot
of porn.
All You Zombies.
Porn, yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. Heinlein's work in general.
Yeah. Samuel Delaney is another one who was coming up just before George R.R. Martin, and sort of at the same time, whose work dealt a lot with weird sexuality. And I mean, it's not unprecedented for fantasy and sci-fi authors to do weird stuff with incest. It's just that I think George was actually engaging with it in kind of a more intentional way than this reader might have thought. It wasn't just about the scandal and the like, oh my gosh, this is so taboo. Wow. It was, you know, he was trying to really get into the head of the people involved in these medieval incest triangles.
I think we're giving this 20-year-old comment way too much due.
Yeah, I think we would have removed this comment on the subreddit. What do you think? Or would we let the done vote stand?
No, I think we would have, based on like what you read aloud, I think it would have stood. I think I would have let it happen. And I think I would have featured it on this cast again.
Excellent.
Based on like what we almost featured.
I think that's true, yeah.
But we had to cut just because of like interest of time.
Right.
It would have made the cut.
Yeah, that's true. We had some good stuff on the cutting board for this one.
It's some raunchy stuff.
I will say, Lank Shi, who replied to this post in the original thing from 2014, said, "It was 1998 on the internet talking about a fantasy novel. Think about the demographic."
I would just ask the question, is Jon having sex with Kat and having a child more reprehensible than Aegon marrying both his sisters?
I don't think it is. I mean, like, I just... maybe I'm just desensitized by the stepson some other trope. But, like, I just don't think it's worse.
I mean, I think
it's just because we know Jon and Kat. We don't know Aegon and Visenya and Rhaenys.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean about the template. Because, like, yeah, okay, you could see... Yeah, like, there's weird incest stuff going on, and it seems normal for those characters because that's how they're introduced. Even to a certain extent, Jaime and Cersei. I mean, not that it's normal for them, but that, like, the first we see, you know, we know them as the incest twins from fairly early in the story. Whereas, like, if Kat and Jon, they do spend a lot of time in a basically mother-son relationship, even if it's not, you know, necessarily a healthy dynamic. So it's a lot ickier to see that transition into something creepy as opposed to the way we're introduced to
also because Jon's very young.
Yeah, that too.
Jon's like 14.
Yeah.
It's also, you're seeing it at this point from like 2 books, whereas in most series, right now, we see it as like a grand fantasy series with many different plots and many different threads, where at the time, you could possibly see like Kat going up to the wall just because it feels like part of the plot that she has to go up there so she can see another point of view or something like that, where the story is actually smaller, whereas it's really quite larger than, you know, just being 2 books by now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to that point, in the 1993 letter, it does have Kat going to the wall with, I believe, Bran and Arya.
Yep. That's
so
right.
you can see why people might see that convergence happening. I don't know if I would have taken it as far as
writing
Jon
this,
and Kat hooking up, but you can see that convergence of characters happening at around the wall.
Sure.
I mean, there's Jon Arya. I would say that's worse than Jon Kat.
I agree. I do think Jon Arya is worse than Jon
That's a fair
Kat.
point. That's
And George legitimately wrote that on a piece of paper that he thought Jon and Arya would be in a love triangle
he
with
signed
Tyrion.
his name to it.
Yep.
So, commenter from 1998, you are not as bad as George R.R. Martin.
There were some other good ones from that old post. A lot of them revolve around things that Robb will do, like sacking Casterly Rock or joining Jon to defeat the others. All those kind of things, which, that's obviously what George is wanting you to think going into the Red Wedding.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So those theories, I mean, they're disproved, but they're good theories in the sense that George is trying to get you to think that before he drops a big one on you.
I think definitely that if you're following Robb's plot and you don't really have a grasp for how much George is trying to subvert the genre he's writing in, I think you could very easily think that Robb is like the hero of the story.
Yeah.
And that he's going to go on like a conquest vengeance thing for Ned, especially in a Clash of Kings. He's doing incredibly well. Tywin Lannister's afraid of him.
Right.
Which, knowing George, that means he's screwed. But if you read normal fantasy, then you would think Robb's on the upswing. And I think these are completely reasonable.
Yeah. Also, like, it was enough of a subversion, enough of a surprise to have Kat as the main point of view for Robb, to have the hero's mother. Like that in and of itself was a surprising conceit for Robb's story, I think. To have, like George has said, like King Arthur's mother and that perspective. And you don't expect King Arthur to die, like, before he's barely got the sword out of the stone. So it's like this extra hammer blow when it comes to the meta level.
Oh my god, I just thought of something. The sword and the stone, James from the crag, which is a large rock. You see where I'm going with that?
I see. Yeah.
He put his sword in the stone, and then it killed him right afterwards.
Ouch. That's pretty good.
For debunked ones, I think a really good one is Brienne shouting the word after she was hanged.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, she was attempted to be hanged by Lady Stoneheart. The situation is that, what is it? She can yell sword or something? She can answer one of two words. One of them she'll die. One of them she'll go and get Jaime for Lady Stoneheart.
Well, she's supposed to answer, like, the question, but then she doesn't. And so the end of their chapter just ends with her shouting a word. And so the question is, what word was it and what does it refer to?
And a lot of people thought she was yelling Stannis, which...
Is that a big thing?
I wouldn't have guessed that. Apparently.
Because I said that on the last cast, like, that was my read-through, because from watching it on the show, like, I
thought it was obvious, too, but...
Because you get so many fewer scenes on the show, these moments become enhanced, and they like, colored my influence of reading the book, so when I read that moment, I thought, like, oh, it's gonna be Stannis, because I thought it was, like, Chekhov Stannis.
Sure,
like, it's going to come up later on, because it made it into the show. Obviously, the showrunners have this totally planned out, and they know what they're doing.
Hot take.
Yeah. Ooh, spicy.
So
yeah,
but I mean, to the show's credit, they did, because eventually Stannis and Brienne came up again in a way. So that it does, it does fulfill itself in the show, even if that's not going to happen in the books, or maybe it will.
True,
but. I didn't realize that this was like a theory that many people had thought.
Apparently, people had many different interpretations of what she actually said.
Yeah,
I mean, like you, I thought it was fairly obvious that she was going to save Pod.
Oh,
that she was going to yell, and she actually yelled sword, meaning that she was going to save herself and Pod and go get Jaime.
I think that was the implication.
But that's what George thought too. That's the interesting part of the question, is that apparently he was like taken aback that somebody thought she didn't say sword.
Right.
It's because everyone's watched Braveheart and they tell him that he should yell mercy at the end, and instead he yells freedom. And so everyone knows that there's always that other choice of the other thing that you can shout.
Can you give us a dramatic reenactment of the freedom yell?
No.
Michael?
Freedom.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Perfect.
That was from a peasant's point of view who heard it several miles away.
No, that was Longshanks up in his dying bed.
Exactly.
That's what he heard.
Yeah. I mean, the Brienne one I think is interesting because it's one that George himself has debunked, in the sense that anyone who thought it was something other than sword, you can cite the "So Spake Martin" to them now and go, sorry, nice try engaging with the text, nerd, but actually the author said it's this. No, that's not generous.
No, I think that's actually a good point, that George sometimes thinks his story is much more clear than it actually is. Maybe he's giving his audience more credit than it deserves, or he's outthinking himself because he's so in his head about it. But a lot of times he answers these questions at cons and on his blog, and they're like huge revelations, and he tosses them out like they're scraps. It's kind of odd the way it happens.
Yeah.
Or it's just that he didn't think that anyone would have 7 years or more
that
to
too.
think these things
Yeah.
through.
But that's what I mean. Like, he didn't think they were big mysteries anybody cared about, so he's just answering them honestly.
Right.
Whereas the ones that he thinks are big mysteries, he always goes like, "Oh, keep reading," or "That's all I'll say about that."
Have some more cheese. Yeah.
And speaking of things that have been debunked by George, so this one was actually in a roundabout way debunked by George for a long time. For obvious reasons, people have speculated on the identity of Cold Hands. And this plays out a little differently in the TV show, but an oft-suggested theory was that Benjen was Cold Hands. However, there's obviously a lot of reasons to think that.
Mm-hmm.
User_Honeybird took a visit to the Cushing Library, Texas A&M, and found the 1,600-page original Dance with Dragons manuscript, and there, George's editor had asked if Cold Hands is Benjen, and George replies back, written back in the manuscript, no. So that put a rest to that theory for a long time, but obviously the show went the way that it did. Decided to make that theory come true, even though George put his foot down on it secretly, in secret. That was never supposed to necessarily reach public eye.
I love the way the question is phrased by the editor, too. It's exactly like a fan or like something on our board. It's, is this Benjen? I think it's Benjen. And does Bran never recognize him because he never sees his face fully? Like, that's a Song of Ice and Fire Redditor if I've ever seen it.
It's like, no.
And he just answers no.
Circle.
Red ink, circle, get out of my face.
I know, there's even a smiley face, yeah.
You could wonder, is this George like being like, no, do your job. You're supposed to edit the book.
Not ask fan theories.
Well,
Those theories to me. But yeah, I do believe it's...
That would be editing. If that's a big point, then it should be more clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the editor might be even asking, like, is this Benjen? Because if it's Benjen, maybe the idea of Bran not recognizing the face needs to, I don't know, they need to make it clear that's, to make it clear that the face is obscured or something else.
It does it say in the book at this point that Leaf says he died long ago?
The question is, what does Leaf consider long ago?
Yeah,
Like,
but is that in the book at this point, or did George see this remark and say, like, oh, I should make it clear that this isn't Benjen and add this in?
Oh,
that's a good question, yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question, Aaron.
They lock the manuscript off, so now you can't see it.
Yep.
This one specifically.
Yeah.
I think you can still get game through Feast.
Yeah.
You have to ask for it, though. This was just on display, wasn't it?
and then the librarians will eye you like,
Get out of here, nerds.
Creep.
I know what you're up to.
Yeah, that's probably right, Aaron, that maybe some of the characterization you get later is because the editor was confused.
Yeah.
That's a good insight right there.
Right, to avoid that confusion, sure.
Although it's still unclear because nobody knows who Cold Hand is.
Yeah. Maybe George doesn't either.
Yes.
But it's clear that it's not. It's more clear that it's not Benjen. You know, it's.
If you've read this manuscript, yes.
It's random raven teeth to be introduced in one of the Duncan eggs that has not been published.
Probably.
There hasn't been one in many years.
I'm just sort of asking in general, has there been a case in A Song of Ice and Fire where somebody actually wearing a mask has become somewhat important?
Ooh.
There aren't that many people who wear masks.
Quaith is the only one I can think of.
What do you consider a mask?
Something over their face?
Jack and Hagar?
Because, like, Jock and Hagar, and I'm also just wondering, like, Varys wears quite a few disguises, and do those count as masks?
Okay, so disguises. Is there anyone wearing disguises that has been, like, a huge reveal that it's someone other than Jaqen?
Barristan?
I thought that was pretty obvious when he showed up.
I did not.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm a dingus.
I'm sorry.
But I don't know if it's a mask. I don't want to get too metaphorical with mask because I think then there's a lot of small reveals about like, oh, this is that and this is that.
Okay, so let me narrow the question then. Someone that has been specifically mentioned like by George, that, like their face is obscured by something. Has there ever been a case where one of those characters ended up being very important or someone like missing?
For what it's worth, just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't ever happen.
That is very true, but if we're looking for patterns in his writing, if he keeps putting in mass characters and having them go nowhere, then maybe this is also a nowhere thing for Cold Hands.
But if there aren't that many mass characters, with the exception of, like, Cold Hands and Quaith,
yeah,
then
you gotta go off something.
You can't say that there's, like...
I'd posit that Germ feels there's more depth to it when a character is unmasked and portraying somebody else, like how Sansa is portrayed as Elaine.
Oh.
That adds more depth and interestingness to the story. Or Jane as Arya. Or as...
Ramsay as Reek.
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting because you don't even... Like, is there a good parallel to the man in the Iron Mask in A Song of Ice and Fire?
Exactly.
In a literal sense, yeah.
It's sort of, is George playing with us by saying, like, oh, his face is obscured, so maybe he's someone important? Or is this someone that he also considers obvious, and he's confused that nobody else has figured it out yet?
I think if it was...
I don't think he thinks this one is obvious.
I think if it was the obvious one, it would be Benjen. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
And there would be more evidence for, like that it would be a stronger case that it was Benjen. Yeah, that's a tough one. A masked character turned out important.
I've also wondered before if it was actually a dude or if it was a girl.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard that one.
Like Danny Flint?
Brave Danny Flint?
I toyed with the idea for a while that it was Elaine, what's her face? The Targaryen who flew up north.
Alysanne?
Alysanne?
Oh, good Queen Alysanne?
Yeah.
She's long.
I don't... Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, that's part of Cold Hand's background. He died long ago.
They killed him long ago. Oh, no, wait.
Ah. Well, they killed him, so that implies the others.
And also, it's him.
And these are just musings that I had. That I
select her I mean,
I like the creativity, though.
Maybe she was a heavy smoker for a long time. She sounds like a dude now. I don't know.
Yeah, Alysanne.
That's sour leaf.
Were there any other disproved ones we wanted to hit?
There's one in particular that I feel like should be put out as a PSA, because I still see it circulating sometimes, the idea that Jane Westerling's hips, that there's a discrepancy in the way they're described between two books. One thinks, Catelyn thinks they look childbearing, Jaime thinks of them as narrow, and that this has sparked theories that Jane is a fake, all this kind of stuff. George R. Martin has said at a signing in 2011, according to a fan, that the hips were a mistake. This was not some sort of intentional conspiracy. Ooh. So all of these theories, and I remember seeing a lot of them on the subreddit, even well after this was debunked in 2011. And it's still occasionally they pop up. That Jane was a fake, that the Jane we see in Feast specifically is an imposter, that the real Jane is pregnant and hidden somewhere, all that kind of stuff. But George R. Martin has debunked this and said that no, Jane is Jane. The hips were a lie.
The hips did lie.
I mean, there are a lot of things like that. Renly's eye color changes. Renly's horse gender changes. Is that another one?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wait.
Jaime's?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It was Jaime or Theon. But yeah.
There's mistakes in the books. I mean, sometimes people hang a lot on these kind of mistakes, especially like distance and time things. They're very long books, and they're not precise.
Yeah.
These kind of things happen.
Exactly.
There's only so many editors, and there's so many facts and so many characters you have to keep track of that some point Jane's hips accidentally fluctuate.
And George has said that he does take such pains to make sure that, like, if things are mismatched, that he's doing that on purpose. That, like, he wants his narrators to be unreliable. So it does. It sucks when one of these slips through, because it means we are supposed to be hunting for these discrepancies and these sort of, these little hints that what we're seeing might not be reliable, but sometimes errors slip through. And so we have to be able to discern what is a George error and what is, an intentional character error, an in-character error, like Arya misremembering the name of Joffrey's sword. That was an intentional error that George R. Martin put in. Not just him forgetting Joffrey's sword, although maybe it was just him forgetting Joffrey's sword and saying, "Oh yeah, that was Arya." Unreliable narrators, huh?
Fake news, huh?
Yeah. So you guys want to move on to some theories that were not debunked, that in fact were shots in the dark that came true years later.
All right. So the first one that came true, which was sort of a Hail Mary, was that the Three-Eyed Crow's identity is actually Lord Brynden Rivers, the Blood Raven. Now this is something that was confirmed more or less in the World of Ice and Fire, and I think somebody ask George about it?
It's confirmed in Dance as well, right?
Yeah. But people were wondering, there's this weird story about Blood Raven going missing, and he was talking about him in Dunk and Egg, and people were trying to figure out who's this weird Three-Eyed Raven character, and it's like, somebody just threw out Blood Raven, and it turned out to be right. But it's interesting the way that the character came about, because it wasn't always that way. That the character Blood Raven was not invented until he started writing Dunk and Egg and looking more into the Blackfire rebellions. So for a long time, it was this sort of like mysterious, like weirwood wizard contacting Bran, which makes it even more impressive that someone actually picked out the correct character.
Absolutely.
After he started being introduced.
Yeah. I can't I can't imagine just like picking out, oh yeah, it's Blood Raven. I guess by luck of the draw, sure.
No, yeah, it's that guy.
But,
even in Dunk and Egg, you don't even see him till the third story.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's supposed to be like generic Targaryen, wasn't it? He wasn't like settled on which one it would be.
It was up in the air. He said he thought it was a Targaryen, but he wasn't sure on who he was or what his history. I mean, even Aemon Blackfire didn't come into existence until I think Jon said his name in A Storm of Swords.
Yeah. But the third story came out right before Dance, right? So that would have meant that it was top of mind for people.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
I think there's a mention of like 1,000 Eyes on One, maybe. Maybe.
Oh no, Daemon Blackfire. I'm sorry, Daemon.
In Storm.
They all sort of came together all at once. Which, for the clever reader that's looking at Dunk and Egg and being like, what is this for? In the same way we might be looking at Fire and Blood now. I mean, honestly, he was leaving hints for characters that are still against all odds alive in his story in Blood Raven.
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I also kind of wonder if he cut out anything that would have been the what is this for in Volume 1, which is why we're not why it's cutting off at Aegon III in Fire and Blood.
Ooh.
Because otherwise too much might be given away with Blackfire stuff.
I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I bet that's right. I bet you're right.
Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit in our section on is the World of Ice and Fire like a cash grab section.
That's right.
Which is about like, well, the ultimate conclusion is that no, it's not, but it does lead to some storytelling problems if George writes himself, as Sam brought up, into a corner as far as like this stuff comes more naturally when he's writing the main novels. And if he sets all these histories out in advance, then he can't really flesh them out as far as what would fit best for the Song of Ice and Fire saga.
That's true. I also think a really interesting thing about these these extra books that he keeps coming out with, I feel like when people propose Blood Raven as the Three-Eyed Crow, I think a lot of people disbelieve them. They're like, you're reading way too much into it. These stories don't mean that much. They're just cash grabs. Nobody cares. And then it's like, oh no, he was actually doing something serious with those in terms of laying groundwork for his future characters. And Blood Raven's arguably one of the more influential characters in the story, just not in a direct way, and introduced largely through these short stories and histories that people get angry about when he releases them.
Yeah, I do think that it was intentionally, a lot of that was intentionally like played up in the Mystery Knight. So another theory that came about actually fairly early on was Aegon being alive, and maybe even the return of Jon Connington. And there's a whole section about this over on the archive of A Song of Ice and Fire lore of the Citadel. And even as early as the first book, people were asking George about the fate of baby Aegon, pointing out that Rhaenys had died and that Aegon's face had been smashed in. And while George would give definitive statements about Rhaenys having been dead, he was a little more evasive about giving answers regarding Aegon. You know, I think that's a testament to how honest George is when it comes to answering questions about, is X theory true and is X theory not true? He doesn't lie. If he doesn't want to give something away, he will give a non-answer or he'll be evasive. So
definitely.
Yeah.
that's what happened here with Aegon, and that signaled, that Aegon could definitely play a role in the story. Now, the twist on all that, of course, is that there are a lot of theories as to whether Aegon is a Blackfyre or is a true Targaryen. So,
Great flame.
Is the Aegon that shows up actually Aegon, but it's Aegon in the name of who he's supposed to be representing.
Yes.
Right. Is he Aegon the Sixth, or is he Aegon, son of somebody?
I mean, he's the son of somebody. Everybody's the son or daughter of somebody.
He could be the son of a preacher man. I mean, we just...
Oh my god, that's true.
Which would make sense because his mother is Septa Lemore. Bingo.
Yes.
Ooh. I like
George
this.
could have answered this as well, saying, like, no, he's not. And then we get into this Aegon reveal later, which would muddle the waters some. But George knew that he was going to come back with this eventually, even if it's not truly Aegon. And he wasn't going to confirm it. But he was like, hey, there's more to this. Keep reading. You'll see. And then more questions will emerge from that.
So something that's interesting that does muddy this a little, and granted this was also an answer given much earlier on, it has to have been post-Clash, though, is user Zionius, I want to say there's an underscore before the name, was doing a compilation of some obscure or less cited things that George R. R. Martin has said that aren't collected in the So Spake Martin. And one of them is that someone had asked George, is the baby in the vision that Dany sees in the House of the Undying, is that baby alive? And George says that no, that baby is dead. So.
Ooh.
Oh.
Interesting. I'd have to track that down. It doesn't necessarily. I mean.
That baby is dead. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, there was someone else who pointed out. I forgot in the comments. That it doesn't necessarily have to mean what we think it means, but yeah.
Well, I think directly, Rhaegar in that vision gets asked what the child's name would be. He says, Aegon, what better name for a king?
Yeah. Yeah. So worth noting that. Of course.
Yeah. That could be a coy answer in the sense of like Catelyn Stark is dead, but Lady Stowe, like not that I'm not suggesting that young Griff is a reanimated Aegon, just that like it's
ooh, I'm on board.
That's spicy.
Okay.
But just that George could, even if that does sound very straightforward, that George might see himself being very coy and clever. You know, like, oh yeah, well, it's not a baby anymore. It's a young man.
Or like they ask if the Hound is dead, and it's like, yes, the Hound is dead, but not Sandor, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
he's the Gravedigger now. That identity has died.
So
that weird thing.
That's pretty interesting, though. Yeah, the So Spake Martins on Aegon are pretty compelling.
I think I'm impressed, especially impressed that somebody picked out that Connington was alive.
Oh.
Yeah,
like as a part of this.
Yeah.
Aegon, it's right there when George's answer that like, oh, maybe Aegon's alive, but Connington? Why would you ever think he was alive?
Why would you ever think about Connington?
Well, if you put it, A, yes, why would you ever think about Jon Connington? But B, you do have some potential clues that could point to it if you put it together with what Varys and Illyrio are talking about underneath the crypts, or like not the crypts, in the bowels of King's Landing of the Red Keep, where they're saying that if one hand could disappear,
the skull thing,
then why not another? And we know now in hindsight that they're talking about Jon Connington, but perhaps someone else also put together that the hand that they were referring to in that was Jon Connington, considering that the other hands, right, are accounted for.
I would think Jon Arryn would be more likely based on that passage, that like his death was fake somehow. I would never go to Connington.
Well, Connington doesn't come up. He's never mentioned, fleshed out until Storm of Swords. Yeah, he's not created until that moment. So I don't. Is Chelstead, and I know Rosard has to be mentioned before that.
Oh yeah, well Jaime's definitely stabs him.
And for the record, in the context of the Varys and Illyrio conversation, the surface reading of it is, if one hand can die, why not another? You know, implying if Jon Arryn can die, why not Ned? So there is a surface reading there that makes a complete sense 100% without Jon Connington. It's only knowing about Jon Connington that kind of makes you, do like sort of turn around and go, oh wait, hold on. There might have been a little double entendre there.
That goes together well with the timing, though, if depending on when the theories about John Connington returning arose, because you pointed out that they started building more of John Connington in A Storm of Swords, and A Storm of Swords is also when we get the reveal that Varys and Illyrio are not the ones responsible for the death of Jon Arryn.
Yeah.
So if we know that Jon Arryn's death is not caused by Varys and Illyrio, then who else could they be talking about? And as you said,
that's a good point.
John Connington is there. So it depends on whenever that theory arose.
Yeah, it would have to be after Storms, so yeah. There is a pretty cool theory that was proved correct at like the 11th hour this was posted. Over on Tower of the Hand, Ghost Love Singer posted this essay. I want to say it was like early June 2011, so just before Dance was released. They posted this theory that Sir Davos Seaworth was alive and that he was not in fact dead as we are told in Feast. Now, part of this comes from the irrefutable evidence from George R. R. Martin himself that Davos will have point of view chapters in A Dance with Dragons. But
that's pretty definitive.
You would know going into Dance that it overlaps with Feast. So you could also believe that, you know, we're going to get like one chapter of Davos in Dance where it's him getting his head cut off. You know, that what we find out in Feast is real. But this person, Ghost Love Singer, correctly argues, obviously, that Davos' death, you know, it occurs off camera. There's no point of view near Wyman Manderly, who could be a really important character. And we see that that's exactly what happens, is that Davos becomes our point of view on a very important component of like the Northern plot. And it also, as they put it, it seems more than odd that the author would telegraph the death of a major character to this degree. Merely the fact that we've been told third hand that Davos is dead prior to reading more of his chapters is indicative of the execution being a ruse. And I mean, that's just, it's a very sharp reading of Feast and really, I think, very accurately locks onto the way GRRM was writing this quote unquote twist about Davos and what's going on in White Harbor. Maybe we should be looking at this little essay, which is entitled Bones from the Feast, Sir Davos, part of the Bones from the Feast series, I think. Looking at it as sort of an example of a way to look at what's happening in Dance, what we might think is being telegraphed obviously or not obviously, and how that might pop up in The Winds of Winter. But yeah, I mean, it's so smart and prescient. Did you guys buy it on your first time that Davos was dead?
Interesting that I didn't.
I had an interesting experience reading it because while I was reading through these books, there was this interactive map that is on the web by Sir Mountain Goat, who gives like all of the locations that point of views travel and stuff, and I thought it was like a really helpful guide. And so I'm reading through it, and like it allows you to move the scroll bar like as your point of view is reading and through the chapters. And so as I'm reading through it, I get to this point, I'm like, wow, everyone, is Davos actually dead? And to Sir Mountain Goat's credit, he has Davos moving up to White Harbor and then a skull appearing over his location, indicating that he has actually died. And I'm like, oh man, like it seems like very, very likely that Davos is actually dead. I don't know, but it seems like if somebody was making this map, that they would not have possibly taken the care to put into it that Davos has actually not died if he did. So I was kind of believing it because I was very cynical about Sir Mountain Goat's interpretation of the books here. But then I get to those chapters in Dance and I read it and I'm like, oh my God, like he's actually alive. And there's so much more depth, and I was just so much more, I think, pulled into the story and uplifted by Davos's chapter and Manderly's revelation that he's not actually gonna kill him there.
Yeah.
That I thought that was great, and a lot of credit to Sir Mountain Goat for making this so interactive that it takes the fake death of the chapter and puts it into the narrative of reading it through. So major props to that guy or gal if he's a goat lady.
Yeah, the goat man. Yeah, sure.
Know.
They interviewed him, right, on Radio Westeros?
I think I listened to that because that was like a while ago. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
It's a really early episode. Yeah, I think they did interview.
Excellent. Well, I'll have to go back and check that out over at Friends of the Cast Radio Westeros.
Yes, they did on episode 4, Worldcon of Ice and Fire. They meet him at a con, at Worldcon.
Wow.
Or this person.
Oh, Worldcon.
where we could be nominated if we're going to Worldcon. Nominate Maester Monthly.
You can't do it anymore for this
anyway.
year, but yeah.
Everyone get us to Worldcon. I mean, we could theoretically get ourselves to Worldcon in Dublin, but get us into the Hugo Losers Party at Worldcon.
Ooh. All I'm saying is if we get into the losers party, we're going to ask George so many questions.
Oh my God.
This is really for your benefit.
Yeah. Seriously, get your parents to give you their credit card and run up a bunch of bills on it, signing up for multiple Worldcon memberships and nominating us for Hugos. We will repay you by asking George questions. Not literally. We won't literally repay you. Anyway.
I feel like knowledge is a worthy repayment.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an appropriate podcast to be nominated, so...
Appropriate. George R.R. Martin.
He said we are appropriate, and we'll ask him again and confirm at the party. So did you think that we were an appropriate choice to be nominated for the Hugo Awards? And he's gonna be like, I don't know.
And we'll show him the picture of our faces photoshopped onto the Aegon and his sisters.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he'll be like, keep reading. And he'll be like,
What was Eliana and Matt's experience reading this?
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys believe Davos was dead?
No.
Something about it just felt off to me, and I didn't really think much of it, and I also just didn't really think that. It just felt off, like...
Yeah.
Felt like gossip.
It felt like a fake out.
When I was reading it, I just thought, there's no way the Manderlys are this loyal to the Lannisters that they'd actually kill Davos Seaworth for them.
Oh, I didn't think that deep.
They're presented as just, like, why would a Northern house kneel to the Lannisters that much? That part just set off alarm bells in my head. I'm like, okay, so Davos isn't dead. Also, this is one of George's clearly favorite characters. I don't think he would kill him off screen for such a low stake.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure I believed it, and it was for the same reason that, like, I didn't really believe that Cersei's plot to assassinate Jon Snow was going to work.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't trust that things were going to go well for Cersei. So I was like, oh, okay, so people are just feeding her bad information all over the place. This is probably part of that, I would hope. Also, I wasn't thinking about that much. I don't want to oversell my deep thoughts here. It was mostly like wishful
Yeah, it was
thinking.
like a split second.
Yeah.
Also, kind of, A Feast for Crows is kind of like the book of plans that fail. So, like,
Yeah.
it's like, there's a lot of
True.
lies in that book. Like, I think every plan in that book goes very, very wrong.
That's true.
I think you guys should have been reading it alongside this interactive map.
Clearly, yeah.
Where like my heart just fell when I saw that skull.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Oh,
like,
no, Aaron.
Man. It was like the Red Wedding for me.
Oh, that would have cut into my binging.
Yeah, can't log on.
Yeah, the time I'm looking at that map, especially because I already got something spoiled for me, like, from not even, like, related things. Like, I didn't have the Red Wedding exactly spoiled for me, but I had Robb Stark being killed spoiled for me.
Yeah, same.
I had Jon Snow's death spoiled for me on a YouTube comment. I wrote something on I was watching YouTube theory videos, and I wrote somewhere
That was
that,
a
like...
mistake.
I know, right? And I wrote somewhere that, like, well, Jon's never going to die. He clearly has plot armor. And someone said, yeah, good luck with that. And I was like, oh no. Not Jon. Not sweet Jon.
Oh, man.
For me, it was, like, completely unrelated. It came out of the blue from, like, a comment on a meme that wasn't even about Game of Thrones. It was something else entirely. It was someone just being a butt.
It's the worst.
That person was being a butt to me, too.
Yeah. But you were on...
I was on YouTube, so I kind of had that coming.
Well, you were on the Song of Ice and Fire theory video. You were, like, courting danger.
Yeah.
That's true. I live on the wild side on YouTube.
I had Emergency Awesome on YouTube spoil Tywin's death in a Doctor Who video because he was saying something like, "Oh, if you read the Game of Thrones books, then you know Charles Dance won't have that much more to do." And I was like, "Oh my god,
That's
Charlie.
so rude. How could they do that?
It is. It pissed me off.
Charlie, please.
How could they do you like that?
So going back to the older post from, is it Iserman to Lidstrom? What is this?
Yep.
Some Canadian?
Iserman to Lidstrom.
All right. Some Canuck.
Well, it's Detroit Red Wings.
So some Michigander posted 3 years ago. I mentioned about these theories that were posted in a Google group or an online group before book 2 came out. So this is all just working off of book 1. And in this list of theories, there are some cartoonishly bad ones, but there's a couple that kind of seem a little obvious. Like R plus L equals J. You can see a lot of the evidence is in book 1 for that. Some of the stronger stuff comes later in the series, but you can see it. But there's one in particular that I think is hilariously accurate. Well, kind of tragically accurate. Someone predicted that because Jane Poole was left with Littlefinger, that we will see her again in a whorehouse and that she'll be made use of outside of King's Landing somehow. And as basically a whore. I'm astounded by that because when she pops up again in Storm, I was like, oh, yeah, right. Her.
Yeah.
So someone clearly thinking a lot about Jane Poole's potential fate here and getting close. And I mean, they didn't exactly nail it because they didn't say, oh, she's going to get married to Ramsay.
I think they got it.
That's about as close as you can get without actually being psychic.
If you're predicting fake Arya, you're on like next level galaxy brain.
And they're not entirely wrong.
Yeah, exactly. She does end up in a whorehouse for a while.
Yeah.
There's a couple other good ones in here, like Tyrion will get framed for either the death of Joffrey or Tommen, which is such a spookily accurate prediction. There's a couple good Tyrion ones, like Tyrion will get rid of Janos Slynt. That happens early in Clash.
Mm-hmm.
These are so good, almost makes me feel bad about my predictions. Like, these people nailed it. And like specific things, not like explaining something weird going on in the books or like maybe this will happen. They're like specific moments, like Janos Slynt, he's out of here at Tyrion's hand. It's like, how do you get that?
It makes you wonder if, I mean, these are all pre-book 2.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder if there were 7 years between book 1 and 2, could people have predicted basically the entire plot of A Clash of Kings? You know, could people have pretty much laid it out? Because there's other stuff in here as well, like Jon will get captured by the wildlings and side with Mance Rayder.
Somebody got that?
Yeah, someone guessed that one.
Wow.
Hold on, let me read the wording on that. Yeah, Jon will get abandoned north of the wall and will join Mance. Which, I mean, you can kind of guess that if you're a fantasy reader and you're like, okay, well, you know, I bet he's the hero. He's going to end up with the spooky evil king guy. But like, you've got to apply some real smart analysis to it, I think. Especially seeing other people reading stuff like who predicted that like Yohn will return Arya to Robb, which is just wrong.
I think that you couldn't have predicted everything that happens in book 2 because you have things like Melisandre, which aren't established yet.
Yeah.
And while, you know, they're not wrong that Tywin technically beats Stannis, they're wrong that Tywin beats Renly, because Stannis is the one who does so with the help of Melisandre. And the idea of shadow babies or shadow assassins hadn't been established anywhere in the series yet.
Right.
So that's not something that could have been predicted.
And at a certain point, you have to wonder, is this very good analysis and predictions, or is this the classic 1,000 monkeys at a typewriter? Like, are there just so many people guessing that some people are right, or are these like really great guesses?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, like R plus L equals J. Almost all the evidence, is rooted in the first book, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's top of the list, and that people came up with it. It's very strongly hinted at in that first book.
Well, and there's a couple in here that are very much like lean on recognizing what the story is doing. So there's one, Bran will learn magic, and another one, Robb will die before the others attack.
Yeah.
And I think these two are interesting because it's people looking at the outline of the story. You know, it's like Bran will learn magic. Okay, yeah, that one's, you know, it's set up well in book 1. He's clearly this magical kid. It makes a lot of sense. Robb will die before the others attack. That one's less obvious, I think, of course, given how many people predicted Robb was going to help fight the others. But it speaks to someone who's sort of looking at the story overall and going, oh, well, to keep it interesting, you know, you got to have some high stakes. Maybe, you know, Robb loses, and then it doesn't, I think, need to come out of it's not just a lucky guess necessarily. It can be someone going, oh, well, you know, it would make sense. It would be cool if the story went this direction. You know, it'd be a good story.
That's a good point.
And of course, you have the fact that the story changed course a bit.
Yeah.
Because, again, the 1993 letter was going in some things were foreshadowed and the story was going in a different direction, and it pivoted away from that.
I think Emmett and Jeff brought it up on Nauticast, where they were talking about how there's this huge amount of foreshadowing that Catelyn was going to end up beyond the wall and dying.
Yeah.
And it's there in the early chapters, just all over the place, and George completely just punted that foreshadowing. She did eventually die, but not in the way that he was setting up. So I think it's probably a lot of people went down the wrong path because George changed his gears so drastically.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
This is also something that like I got into when I was writing this thing, because there's this post by Sir Francis Flute about what would happen if all A Song of Ice and Fire theories came true.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's this classic post that is just hilarious of tying all the different theories together into one big lump sum of what would happen if everything came true. And I thought, like, what would happen if all Song of Ice and Fire theories didn't come true? And this brief, like, flip of that became this long, like, satire, almost fan fiction-y version thing that I was writing called The Tins of Finter, which was back from, like, 2015, which I haven't put up, but I might put it up, like, on a blog or something, because it would be, like, I don't know, what was it when George calls, like, because it's satire, it's not actually fan fiction, because it's
Right.
it's taking something and burlesque sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, those shows, because satire is protected under free speech, and so I was like thinking, oh, what would happen if all theories didn't come true? And it led me down this hole where, like, I figured the story was so off tilt that some fan theories had to come true, or it would just be, like, completely unfulfilled, because you couldn't write around these ideas that are totally set up in the story. And it made me also think that this kind of is a reflection on Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is where a lot of fan theories didn't come true, and the story, like, writes itself around that, and it ultimately leaves the viewer, at least some portion, like, feeling unfulfilled, because it, like, deviates from what was set up in order to give you, like, twists that are, like, not twists in a way.
I mean, I disagree with that analysis of Last Jedi, but I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Same.
I heavily
But-
disagree.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah,
Stepped into
keep
the
going,
wrong
keep going.
bar, Aaron.
it's still whatever. It's still true. You guys are objectively wrong, but
I'll take it.
the idea is that some fan theories are going to have to come true. Otherwise, the story doesn't have a lot of meat behind it, and it's going to move in strange ways to deviate from where it goes in order to...
Right. He can't be totally original.
Because George has set those things up, yeah.
If you're completely original, people won't even recognize the story you're telling.
Yeah, exactly. Like The Last Jedi.
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you again
still
there.
disagree.
Boo, hiss.
Still disagree, but
Strong disagree about The Last Jedi.
I mean, that's a little
All right.
it's a little tautological, but, like, I agree in the sense that, like, yeah, he can't keep writing the story that he's writing if he tries to stop writing the story that he's been writing, you know?
Like the R plus L equals J stuff. Like,
Yes.
George can't write around that.
Yeah.
He
You
can't write
drop it.
around stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to go full the Last Jedi, but, like, I think
we're not doing it.
the foreshadowing for all the Rey theories are, like, orders of magnitude less than what George has put into RLJ. Like, people took crazy details and were like, oh, this means that this person's killing this person's from, like, the extended universe. It's like, there was so little there. It was only the question who her parents are.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree that was a good decision of The Last Jedi. I don't want to get that tangential here. It's just
I did the whole voice and everything, so.
Yeah, you went like hardcore nerd voice.
We want to move on to Hodor. So we have something recordable, something for the podcast.
So the big theory, though, that's been more recent that people have guessed based upon the TV show is that Hodor means hold the door. And two people we know that have guessed this in the past, Mirrodin over on Westeros.org had guessed this back in 2008 on February the 20th, said the poor guy's just asking somebody to hold the door for him. Since he's always carrying someone else around, after a while, hold the door becomes hold the door, hold the door, hold the door, hold the door. Damn it, hold the door. His mind finally snapped. Now all that he can say is Hodor. And there was also this person who ran into George while they're out and about, who has this blog. He was like walking into an elevator with George R. R. Martin, or he's standing there and he's thinking with George in this weird, awkward elevator moment. The guy's name is Michael Ventrella. And he says, I finally figured out why you have a character named Hodor. And Martin goes, oh? And he says, I was thinking about your comment about wanting to be an elevator operator. It's clear to me now that Hodor is short for hold the door. And Martin laughs and he says, you don't know how close to the truth you are.
I love that.
And so,
Yeah, but
fans guess this.
Go, Eliana.
I'm still curious how it's going to play out in the books because George has said it's going to be different. But yeah.
I think some of the time travel stuff is probably going to be a bit different location, and
Oh yeah, that's definitely going to be involved.
It's going to be, time travel short-circuiting. I don't know what the situation will be, because there's no door in Bloodraven's cave. Like, they made that completely for the show.
Yeah, right. I think it's funny because we spent all this time talking about like the, approaching these from a perspective of analysis and like really thinking about the story. This is literally just dumb luck, right? I mean, this is I don't know that there's nothing. The first one's basically a joke, right? It's like you saying hold the door a bunch of times. I guess it's semi-serious, but it's pretty much just dumb luck.
The analytical version that people had grasp on that I kind of adhered to was the idea that, because the Great Other is the name that cannot be said or whatever, that was going to end up being Hodor, and that had something to do with the crypts of Winterfell, and Hodor had his mind scrambled revolving around that. I thought that Hodor was going to be the name of the Great Other, and it's something weird and strange that Walder...
Oh, yeah.
Whatever his last name was, had wandered into, but it's really just this tiny little thing.
It's a little nothing. People went crazy with that name with Hodor. There's a Norse god called Hodor, who's a blind god, and then there's kind of like Hodir, which is sort of like a frost god thing from Norse mythology, and people are like, what if that's actually the name of the Great Other? It's like, it's not. It's a dumb answer. It's nowhere near the analysis people were putting in. It's like the level of theories put in versus the answer. I don't think there's ever been a greater example of like a mismatch.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fun example of a debunked one, I think, right? In that sense, that there were all these theories built around it. But I think a lot of them were meta-textual. They came from outside of the text. The Norse stuff in particular is what I'm thinking of. There's good Crypts of Winterfell stuff and all that, but specifically like reading into Norse mythology and all that. There are definitely influences from Norse mythology and lots of different mythologies and religions in Song of Ice and Fire, but I don't know that we can use those as a frame to predict the story. Because it's more just
I agree completely.
It's like a bag of spices that George R. R. Martin is sprinkling in, but you can't reverse engineer it.
Yeah, he's got camp spice. He's just throwing some on.
Yeah, and so
all the spice you'll need.
Oh, Hodor is Sansa.
My
No, wait.
Wait.
Yes.
New theory.
Actually, this goes back to the one of the first posts we talked about in this cast, the trees thing, where it's like people love Norse mythology and George actually doesn't mention the ash tree as much as people would expect.
Sure, right.
It's a similar concept where you can see he's talking about it with Ig, and you can see he's talking about maybe that thing with like the name Hodor or Hodir or something like that, but that's not really what's going on.
Right,
it's an influence. It's influence, not like a main tenet of the story.
He's drawing on the aesthetics of it, but his story has its own internal story. It's got its own internal logic and consistency that Hold the Door will, have a context by the time it comes up in the story, I'm sure, just like it did in the show, where it'll make sense in the story. And as we've talked about with some of the theories, like you can't necessarily predict that because it's just evidence that isn't on the table yet.
I think it's Isabel, another one of our fellow mods, who keeps talking about how George is a magpie?
Yeah.
Magpie?
Yeah, magpie.
I agree.
And it's the idea that, of course, he's influenced by all these things. We're all influenced by the stories and the sort of ideas and media that we consume. And you just take a little bit of that and let it as you said, like, it's a bag of spices. It adds a little flavor to the story, but it isn't, it's its own story. And that's what creativity is. You take something, a little bit of a lot of different things, and you make something new out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Like, are we supposed to take Robert Baratheon because he's the Storm Lord and he has a hammer and he drinks a lot, that his story will be Thor's? No.
Right, yeah.
It's the spice, as you were talking about, Eliana, is there. He is referencing it, but Thor's story is not Robert's story. And if you try to use Thor to predict Robert, you're in for a real shock.
Yeah, again, it's Sansa's story.
Oh my god.
That's why it's about the spice.
Yep, exactly.
I think the really interesting thing, looking at these theories that have come true, they're not these long, intricate theories with multiple parts and deep analysis that have come to fruition. It's like these small, tiny thoughts that people have had, and that it's just like, these are the directions that the story is going to go, because in the multitude of so many people like commenting and thinking about the series, some people are going to be right just because they kind of like guess it, and some of it does have to do with them being in the right mindset or the right time or position to think about it. But no, it's not these great multiple, like, oh, here's this thing from here, and then, oh, it's foreshadowing this other part over here, and they're all tied together. It's just like, oh, Hodor just means hold the door. It's, oh, Aegon, he's actually not dead in some sense. He's actually alive. Oh, Davos Seaworth wasn't killed. Oh, Bloodraven is actually the three-eyed crow. It's like these tiny little thoughts become what's actually been proven true.
Sure. And I think part of that is one of the reasons I'm so excited for the Winds of Winter to come out next year is that I think
next year
fandom, yeah, you heard it here first.
Oh.
The fandom has, there are more of those long essays and massive, effort posting, a lot of that effort posting that it kind of existed before the show and before the massive popularity really hit. There were certainly things like that exist. I mean, Tower of the Hand, Warg, these places existed, but
yeah.
I think there have been a lot more just like hyper effortful, in-depth essays and all that written predicting what's going to happen in the Winds of Winter than there have been for any other Song of Ice and Fire book, just because the nature of the fandom, it's grown.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting to see come the Winds of Winter what predictions, whether the effort paid off, you know what I mean? Whether the people who put in the most sort of convoluted thought or the most complicated analysis are the ones who were correct, or whether it was, someone who was just like, you know what? I bet Wyman is going to have Rickon killed. I can't explain it. I just think that's going to happen. And then it happens.
Yeah.
And
it's like, oh.
I was just going to say, it's worth pointing out that this is just what we can see and what we can mine, because we don't necessarily have a lot of the discussions people had when the books were first coming out. Since
right, book clubs.
Yeah, I mean they also were lost because they were on sites that went defunct or were deleted because it was like earlier internet days. And the, of course, most prevalent theory in the fandom that was confirmed by the show, R+L=J, that was an in-depth analysis, and a lot of people have contributed to that, and that is like a very multi-part,
that's true,
very well backed up, and people wrote several essays about that. So I don't think it's fair to say that it's just spin-off ideas that people have had that happen to have come true, because we don't have the evidence for all that, and we didn't mind this entire thread that was linked of these not crazy theories, but like these early theories that people had. Some of them might have had very in-depth evidence behind them, and of course that's the case also, again, for R+L=J, and for all we know, that was the case behind how people pinpointed Bloodraven or John Connington, but we don't have that evidence.
It also might have to do with like how George may have changed some of his writing since then, based on, he knew around the time of A Storm of Swords that internet fandoms were like picking up and they were going to be able to think about his stuff, that he may have like done more effort into like cloaking something like R+L=J so it wasn't so surfical, and that it would be like something like a big reveal where you go back after reading The Winds of Winter and like, oh, here are all these different clues. And Going off that same thought, though, like also in a Game of Thrones, you have the Catspaw mystery that was actually done by Joffrey, which at the time, if you were just reading Game of Thrones, you would like the quick short guess, like all these others, would have just been, oh, it's Joffrey, but you wouldn't have all the evidence for it until like A Storm of Swords came around as to why it occurred.
The way that came out is so bizarre too. The Catspaw thing. It was from the World of Ice and Fire app, where essentially George sat down with Elio and somebody that was programming the app, and they bought him a bunch of lunches, and they asked him questions that have been on their mind for forever, and he just answered them. And a whole bunch of them just like knocked out swaths of fan theories.
Well, I had answered it in my book before. You guys didn't think that this was actually it. It's like, well,
it's like, oh, I answered that with Jaime and Tyrion. That's over, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the fandom's like, George, that wasn't good enough. I'm going back in. So we've looked at a lot of theories that have been disproved and a lot of theories that have been proven correct. Is there any sort of general theory crafting rules or guidelines we can draw from these things that we've looked at, or is it really case by case? Like, what do you guys think makes a good fan theory, given that sometimes George changes his mind in between books?
I think the prerequisite is something that George A has not said is something different.
True.
All right.
Like, it has to be something that George has not disproven before. It can be super deep, but it has to be clearly laid out in some way. Like, it has to... It has to be noticeable. It can't be like, oh, here's somebody moving around. It can't be supposition from underneath the text. It has to like clearly jump out at you in some way on a reread. Even if it's like hidden inside like the dialogue or something, it has to stand out that this was somewhat purposeful.
I think there's a difference between a fun and interesting like idea and analysis and something that isn't necessarily a straight up prediction.
Okay.
And those I think I have very low standards for. Like, if it's a fun new idea, I'm down with it, you know. But when it comes to like a fan theory that's trying to predict the way the plot is going, it sort of has to fit this very loosey-goosey feel of A Song of Ice and Fire. It just has to feel like it's gonna fit into the next book.
The tone.
And it's like, I don't even know if I would go so far as use the word tone, because I find it really hard to nail it down exactly, the what makes it fit. I would like to cite in the case Jacob Ellis v. Ohio, 1964, Justice Potter Stewart, who said about pornography, "I know it when I see it." And
I was thinking the same thing when you were talking.
I know, yeah, there we go, man. Drift compatible.
You know it. You know truth when you see it.
But really, like I know what A Song of Ice and Fire feels like. Like, I know what reading the books feels like. I know what that plot feels like. So I know when I'm looking at porn. No, I know when I'm reading something that sounds like or feels like A Song of Ice and Fire. I know that's a cop-out answer because there's no hard criteria there, but that's as good as I can get.
No hard criteria?
It's that Jeff Brennan Beefish subjectivity, objectivity. It's like you know it when it's objectively true.
Yep.
Because it subjectively feels right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a pretty good sort of pattern that goes to his revealing of mysteries. I think we talked about this earlier. He starts off vague, and then he steps it up a little bit, and it becomes more obvious. Then it becomes blatantly on the page, and then the thing happens. If you can make a theory that works in that way, sort of in that 4-step process, then you're probably closer than most to figure out what he's actually doing. He's done that pattern so many times with so many random plots that he wants to give you breadcrumbs, he wants to get a little bit more, then he wants to smack you in the face with it, and then he wants it to be real.
And Grohl has cited it as the threefold revelation strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the difficulty with that is just like, it doesn't always happen in the earlier books. Like, again, bringing up the Shadow Babies and Melisandre in book 2. There's no roots for that in book 1. It's the strategy is partially the mystery, but I think it's also to help prevent being accused of a deus ex machina, so that you have something you can point to structurally. So you can say this didn't come out of nowhere, it was hinted at. And not just for the theory crafting, especially when it happens within the same book.
But it specifically shouldn't be hinted at just once or twice. Like, it shouldn't be like this random sentence somewhere in this book and that means something else entirely. There should be an escalating pattern of evidence for what you're looking at as you're getting closer to the reveal.
The Shadow Baby one is pretty interesting because it's the most overt sense of magic jumping into the story, but George crafts it so that Melisandre is like shrouded in mystery, and everybody is from the first chapter of Clash is Crescent wondering like what she is about, what she has underneath her gown. I don't know how to.
I think Melisandre is an interesting case when we're talking about theories because she's kind of like she is a gun with one bullet. He can get away with the Shadow Baby thing like once, and by once I count Courtney, Penrose, and Renly as once because they're two parts of the same reveal of her powers. One is like showing the end result. One is showing how it happened. But you can only do that once with a certain situation or character. You can't keep pulling things out like that. So those sort of out of nowhere things, they're going to happen, but George R. Martin seems like a capable enough guy that he's not just doing that all over the story. You know, he's taken these one bullet guns, these silver bullets or whatever you want to call them, using them exactly once and then not any further magic developments or unexpected developments actually do have a little bit better foundation. Like, for example, I guess you could say like resurrection in the text, especially if Mel ends up resurrecting Jon. That obviously has a lot of well-established build-up going into it. And that's why the idea that Jon will come back from the dead is kind of a strong, there's lots of roots for it in the story.
Jon becoming Lord Commander is in a similar way. It starts off small and he keeps building. And then the chapter before, he has Jon say he is 2 former Lord Commanders of different things. It's like, okay, then it's there. And now he has become the Lord Commander. But before that, it was like Sam looking around and trying to like figure out a way for Jon to become Lord Commander. That's less obvious, but then it's right there.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Sure.
The one character that feels very Melisandre-like, at least as far as the formation and aura around them that we have right now, I think is probably why there are so many theories surrounding this person, is Euron.
I think it's exactly right.
Somebody shrouded in mystery who's like being builded towards something that is going to be almost Shadow Baby-like.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In a certain sense.
That's a good point.
He's so Lovecraft, it's kind of insane.
Like, George may just have one bullet for this person, but it's going
to be a giant Kraken-shaped bullet.
Or is it going to be...
a sea of blood, even.
Or will I finally release Come Josephine?
What?
Hot take. I have a... never mind.
Wow.
Eliana, I've talked to you about it before.
What's a Josephine?
Never mind. Never mind. Back on topic.
Watching her brain work is amazing. But it's interesting that Melisandre being a foreshadowing almost for Euron. He probably didn't... Well, Euron was mentioned early on, wasn't he?
He was probably mentioned along with Theon's uncles earlier on.
Yeah.
He's kind of like an escalation of the magic rising in the story. Like, you get Melisandre, you get the Black Gate, you get the dragons being born, and then Euron shows up, and it's like, if he was in a Game of Thrones, I would think he was a charlatan. But after all the effort he's put into showing us that this is maybe closer to high fantasy than we think, that it might be real, that he's going to like turn the sea to blood and krakens and the deep ones are going to come out of the water or something crazy.
He could have a couple of guns too. He could be like finger guns, pew, pew, like Bloodraven, Maynard Plum.
Pew, pew. Yeah.
Because there's been more buildup with him than Melisandre had. So.
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for our discussion of old theories. We dusted off some ancient tomes. We stuck our fingers between the pages and really got into some of the some of the classics on some of the classics in A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. Now, as we said at the end of last episode, if you've enjoyed Maester Monthly and you want us and the world at large, including your estranged parents, to know it, please consider leaving an iTunes review. It's a great way for us to know if people like the podcast. It's a great way for other people to find the podcast. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. Even if you watch on YouTube or listen on Google, you can leave an iTunes review. Of course, we also read the YouTube comments. We read the Reddit comments. We read all the comments. We print them out and tape them to the ceilings above our beds. And of course, tell your friends to listen to us, because word of mouth is the way news got around back in the oldie times when there was a town crier. So find your local town crier and tell him to cry about Maester Monthly.
Teach it to your parrot. Have it sit on your cow on the main green.
If you go into a pet store and teach parrots to say download Maester Monthly, I will Venmo you $5. This is not a. I will Venmo you $5, not per parrot, just a flat sum of $5. But
literally any animal. It doesn't even have, as long as it's not a people's. It can, as long as you've trained some sort of animal to say, download Maester Monthly, you get $5.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Download Maester Monthly.
So yes, train your parrots or your shadow parrots, if you have them, to say download Maester Monthly. And if those parrots want to know where they can find Maester Monthly, you can always find us at Google Play. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. And we have a website at WordPress at maestermonthly.wordpress.com. You can also always find us on YouTube, where Aaron puts an enormous amount of effort into the video and the animations, the MS Paints.
Sad Sam. It's going to be really good.
That go
Effort.
Effort.
It's like it's not actually successful. He's just really trying.
Yeah, Aaron tries so hard for our...
He got so far, but in the end...
and
doesn't even matter.
We are available on most major operating systems. You can find us on Twitter at Maester Monthly. Don't give me that look. We are on Twitter at Maester Monthly. We have a Facebook page as well. And as always, we ask, nay, demand that you smash the MF and like button. I got
please, this guy needs
spit
it
all over my pop filter.
Hulk smash that like button.
Now, we also, I think we all have some things we need to plug for our own projects as well. I know, Eliana, you've got...
Yeah, so obviously you all know me, Eliana, Glass Table Girl. I've launched a new podcast with Gasp Chloe, also known as Lies and Arbor on Twitter and Tumblr, or ZombieBait on Reddit, winner of the 2017 Best Character Analysis. We have started a reread podcast called Girls Gone Canon, and as opposed to going through the books as the order that the chapters are presented in the books, we are doing a character reread, and have started off with doing all of Ned's chapters from A Game of Thrones. So, very excited about this journey. Check us out.
I confession, haven't listened all through the first episode. I've listened to the first part of it. Haven't had time to finish it, but it's extremely fun so far. So yeah, y'all should get on that.
If you haven't subscribed to their thing, I don't respect you as a person. So.
Basically.
If I clicked subscribe on Maester Monthly's account, does that count?
That's your main account.
Nice job.
Yeah.
I respect you, Aaron. Nice job.
That is pretty much your main account.
That's my main
opinion.
account.
We all kind of take over. We all skin change into you.
Sometimes. It's kind of weird. Varamir foreskins. Whoa!
So now, Matt, do you have anything to plug?
I do. You can find me at youtube.com/JoeMagician, where today I passed 1,000 subscribers. I'm going to be doing a live stream with Lucifer Means Lightbringer soon. You could probably check that out after this video has come out. We'll be talking about a preview for our Con of Thrones panel about what makes George R.R. Martin great. That'll be awesome. Also, make sure you come to our various panels at Con of Thrones. I'll be on 6 of them, so if you just wander into one of the panels, I might be up there.
Yeah, the odds are good.
And Michael, too. One of us might be up there. There's a very good chance at this point.
Yeah.
And make sure you check out my articles at Watchers on the Wall. The latest one was a brief Targaryen history in anticipation of Fire and Blood.
Which is a not brief Targaryen history.
No, he went into
Yeah.
more. I did a pre-Westeros Targaryen.
He fleshed it out a little.
Fire and Matt.
Like Matt said, you're probably getting this on the eve of Con of Thrones or just about there. But if you are at Con of Thrones, please do stop by our panels. I am doing 5 panels. It's not quite as many as Matt Tholomew, but I'll be doing 5 panels. Like I said, there's a great one with me and Aziz from History of Westeros on Robert E. Howard and George R. R. Martin.
And us.
And the 5-year gap, which is pretty soon after the Aziz and I.
Yeah.
So I consider that a warm-up. I also do a solo podcast called Fantastic Transmissions about science fiction fantasy short stories, and it comes out every other Tuesday. It's about 30 minutes long, so it's kind of the opposite of Maester Monthly, in that it's regularly occurring and short.
There'll be a Reddit meetup at Con of Thrones. Go to it.
Yes, come to it. Well, as always, thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to everyone on Reddit who creates these great posts for us to read, including all of the generations that came before us who created these fun theories for us to laugh at and enjoy. Laugh with and enjoy. And of course, thank you to Mr. George R. Martin for writing the books. I have been Michael, also known as Bookshelf Stud.
And I have been Eliana, also known as Glass Table Girl.
And I have been Matt, also known as Joe Magician.
And I've been Aaron, also known as... Dramatic pause, AdmiralKird.
Oh,
Is that who you are?
Oh, that came out of nowhere. I thought you were going to say Bot of Ice and Fire.
That reveal. A 3-step reveal.
yeah. Oh, I didn't say... my fan theory was that you were Jeff this whole time.
Aaron, otherwise known as the CSS of A Song of Ice and Fire. That's basically your soul at this point. It's like a
until they
Horcrux.
take it away from me because Reddit's being stupid.
Yeah, everybody leave Reddit. That's our closing message.
And tell the redesign people they should stop trying to shove stuff down people's throats too early than it should be because they just want to try and push us off as quick as possible.
That's what Kat said to John. Am I right?
Oh.